Welcome, everybody, to your city council. Thanks for coming. July 21st, 2025. Mayor Blackburn, first thing we're going to do is put our cell phones on quiet so we don't interrupt the. And next we have a land acknowledgement.
Which I will read. As we meet tonight, let all of us remember that today we are stewards of land that has been home to indigenous peoples for thousands of years before the recent arrival of the European heritage dominant culture. We honor this land's ancestors as we go about our business today.
Thank you, Doug. Now let's stand and say Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, we have business from the audience. I don't have the sheet. The sheet may be right there. Great, I will. We have a new police officer, and I see. And I see that some family has come. Congratulations and welcome. I'll hand it over to Chief Holste.
Born and raised. He actually worked for Public Works for about a year. He's on space for it. Goes to the academy next Monday. He and his family felt like looking forward to getting sworn in. Makes me a little nervous, so thank you. Said it wasn't any different than his vows when he got there.
You're welcome. Congratulations. Welcome aboard. Shall we do business or Ellen now? Great. Great. Next, we have a report on some of our legislative efforts. Will, we're going to start with you.
Yeah, well, I'd like to introduce Ellen Miller in the back. Yeah, and I'd like to thank also Representative Helfrich making himself available to join us to get a update on our legislative efforts. Oh, please come ahead. So Ellen's been representing our interests in Salem for about the past 9 months. And as a report in your packet, but also here to give a verbal update along with our representative.
Thanks for coming, Jeff.
Mayor, council members, for the record, my name is Jeff. With that said, I think no secret when I'm in session. Feedback how I'm doing it might have been watching. That said, drafted several different bills, amendments to the bridge look like help.
Thank you so much. Fantastic.
Part of that was the initial conversation was going to be so I went back to 30, 40. Yeah, on that 5 million bonding capacity drastically shrunk. Other projects didn't same stuff, cows, stuff, cascade locks, wherever that was at. So that said, I asked them, what is the minimum to go with and the maximum? Finally, biennium, and then we're at 30, and it's 4 straight back. We did 45 million is biennium. The next 2 biennium subsequent 30. So that gets 5. So we know back in 23, that was 20 million, so 125 million. So for reference, I came into office in 2017. I was working with Senator King against Senator Thompson, Senator King, and so there's been a few press releases gone out. Senator King he is the ranking member on the Transportation Committee on the Washington side, and hey, look what I've been able to help us out with, and so it just wasn't all me. It was Drake Smith, Senator Bonham, and others that helped get that accomplished. But I am going to keep the victory lap because it was no small feat to get that done. I've been working on it for a few years. So very happy. If you have any questions about what that looks like right now, I'll be more than happy to do that.
Thank you. You deserve a victory lap. That's a great, huge asset to our community. Thank you.
So when is the check come? We gotta sell the bonds get sold, and I think next year, and then the money starts flowing in. So that's when it started. The biggest thing was ability to show not just Washington, but show the federal government that Oregon has skin in the game, and we have it on the record that we will be funding the Pacific Fire when we get that done. So that's a big thing. So I think it is no secret that the forecast for revenue has gone down. And the budget writers were very worried about what the budget forecast looked like, even though we had some extra money come in, but we didn't have a lot of the ARPA money or the COVID funds that was dried up. And so we had to really look at what those are and what that looks like. And so there was on the table, I'm on a joint transportation, and that was a 15, we'll round it up, it's 14.7, but $15 billion ask for the citizens to raise taxes and fees and all that. And there was a lot of pushback on it. And so everybody had to take a haircut. And when it comes to the budget, you guys are very keenly aware, $finite coming in, what are these projects going to fund? And so I'm going to switch from transportation to public safety, ways and means. in Public Safety Ways and Means, we were able to preview all the budgets, and we as members sat down for the first time I can think of since 2017, and given the opportunity to prioritize what we want to see in the budgeting process, what's we believe is the most important for our district and the state, and then what's the least important, and then prioritize that out and figure out what the haircuts are. And that worked really well for public safety for me, because we all know public safety is a huge thing in my life and what I think is very important. And transportation is one of those, and housing, but those are those things that are important. So that was what I prioritized was public safety. With that said, we try to figure out on the committee how to prioritize transportation needs. And one of the things the state is lacking is it the priority, or should it be the priority of Oregon Department of Transportation to maintain roads at 60% good or better for roads and bridges? They talk about it, they have these preambles about it, it might be an emission statement, but it is not in state law. And that was one of my hard points when I wrote a bill. It says, let's put this in state law. And people, oh, that sounds really good, but when it came time to put it in there, we don't know, because that's an accountability issue. And so one of the things that we talked about accountability, myself and Senator Bruce Starr were part of the conversation that allowed to get a review of bringing consultants in to review ODOT. And these were experts that had gone through this before in other states where they face challenges for the transportation needs, Colorado, Virginia, wherever they are. And I was really pushing a performance-based infrastructure program. What's the performance measures? Are you meeting them? And if you're meeting them, then you can get bonus pays, but if you're falling behind, you're gonna get penalized for it. And so those were some of the conversations we had. Unfortunately, in contracting and the way the unions work and everything else, sometimes they don't appreciate that type of accountability, where in business you have these performance measures and how you go through them. So that was an interesting ride through that, but we did have the accountability part, and we found out that basically the governor needs to have the ability to hire and fire who the director is, not leave it up to the transportation board. So that was part of that. And then there was fees, and there was tax increases in the RUC, and it's a lot of complicated stuff that I would just kind of roll my eyes, gloss over a little bit. I dug into it and learned more about it. And two things that I knew that our fuels, diesel fuel is taxed at the pump here. So say at the Heights, you have a diesel pickup, a diesel vehicle, the operator has to pay that money to the state tax. The RUC is where all the gas fuels come in. It's paid that when the fuel comes in there, the gas tax is paid at that point to the state. So that was a way of actually causing more cost to the mom and pop gas station and stuff. So we wanted to fix that. We had to fix the weight mile for the truckers because they were out of whack. Colleagues across the aisle wanted to raise everybody's taxes up. Like, well, wait a minute, they've been overpaying for how many years? There's millions upon millions of dollars that they've overpaid. How do we make that whole? That was a conversation. There's an actual lawsuit that the Trucking Association put out for that. So I don't know the particulars of it, or I really want to comment one way or the other on it, but I do know there's a lawsuit and they have to figure out how they're going to remedy that, and that's going to cost them that money. Oregon has probably some of the most complex weight mile taxes systems that you'll see anywhere in the nation. There's about 25, I believe, different taxes in which, depending on the size of your axles and what goes on and where you're traveling to and from. We want to simplify that down to like 10 taxes, 10 little brackets. And so when you do business in the state, when you're from out of state, it's easier to figure out your taxes than to sit there and try to have these different actuaries and tables to try to figure out what do you owe the state of Oregon for traveling to the weight mile and the amount of axles and the weight you carry, all that stuff. And so we're one of the few states that do that. So we don't have to be number one in everything. So we should maybe look at changing that once in a while and simplify that for businesses. Because we want simpler rules and regulations for businesses that don't affect our quality of life. So that said, unfortunately, the transportation package, one of the biggest no-goes for me on it was indexing, which said that a body and rulemaker could sit there and, oh, we need to raise the fuel taxes this year. It's the state legislature's job. That is our job as legislators to figure out where the money goes from, and we shouldn't delegate that to the rulemaking authority. Just like certain things you shouldn't delegate to staff because you are the elected officials and it's what you signed up to do. You're gonna do this or not, because there's consequences for those actions. If you allow it to go to rulemaking, well, they just did rulemaking, you don't have any control over it. So I thought it was important that we didn't allow certain things for indexing. I believe like cost of paper, the cost of toner cartridges all go up. You gotta adjust what's cost. But when you're talking gas tax, penny, 2 pennies, 10 pennies, whatever it is, I don't think that should be delegated to rulemaking outside of what I would call the bureaucracy of the government. Because that just seems to feed within itself, and that's not what it's about. We gotta, less dollars coming in, means less dollars spent. Can't keep taxing people because we see businesses in the state. We had Jim Weld at Southern Oregon, which is a cooler manufacturing club. You've got Dutch Brothers relocated their corporate headquarters to Nevada, Arizona. They relocated. Numerous other companies have left. We now see Intel losing 2,400 jobs. And I sat on the semiconductors committee, and we give, in the past, we created enough incentives, millions and millions of dollars of your tax dollars to go to these companies to stay here in Oregon and build out. Well, they picked up and left. And so some of the people tell me, well, they're doing it nationwide, worldwide. Well, if you look at our land use laws, and this can be a touchy subject depending on where you're at, especially in the gorge. But there's the farm ground, high value farm ground, low value farm ground, all those things, but it costs more money when you're going through in homes. We know what it costs here because we're pinned in by water, a mountain, and 2 valleys, and the national scenic area. So those are hard opportunities to actually build homes. We understand we want to have affordable homes, market rate homes, everything in between. And Intel, the employees come here, they have to make X amount of dollars to actually buy a house. When you go out and Beaverton to start a house like there's about $400,000, I mean, be pretty good house. I mean, prices like that here be pretty good. But that's in the school system, doesn't have the highest. We spend a lot of money on schools, but yet we're ranked towards the bottom on education, and that's not right. So all these factors play when businesses look to stay here. So those are those things that you had to look at, or they looked at and said, guess what? We're going to move 2,400 people out of here, and that's unfortunate. That's a lot of people. So with the combination of those things and other businesses leaving, I'm afraid our next revenue forecast coming up, it's August. Is that right? Yeah, August is the next revenue forecast. Our revenue forecast may go down. They brought a new economist in, which will probably look at the dollars coming in, which I think that will get tightened up. You won't see the kicker as much anymore in play because they'll actually create they'll actually start sharpen pencil and be able to look at it and say, okay, this is the actual, we see the revenue coming in, the projections coming in. If they overshoot, it's not, it causes problems. So it's a guessing game, and no choice to both figured out, but they get paid a lot of money to do that. And so there's that. We talked about ODOT, there's some mismanagement that has gone on. I think that's billions of dollars have gone to that organization, and it's not the frontline workers, it's just somewhere got lost in the bureaucracy of things, money. We don't know where things were at, we don't know where things were at. If 2017 transportation package had a lot of grand projects, but they didn't get funded appropriately. So there's something that the I-5, the covering the Rose Corridor, Abergath. There's a lot of those things that are out there that just cost more and more. That said, looking into the crystal ball, I would say we'll probably have a special session, probably sooner than later. I hear word around the block is it's about a 6-cent tax raise in gas tax. 3 for ODOT, which would make it whole at $350 million, and the rest would go that 50-30-20 split for the cities and counties. So looking at that, one of the things that was interesting was talking to some ODOT employees, talking to others, was that, man, Governor, or whoever in the executive branch, did you ever think of asking the unions to maybe pause and not ask for a pay raise and just go cost of living? They said over $375 million for raises and cost of living. And I'm pretty sure if they would have polled all the ODOT people and said, maybe they all would have said, but I'm guessing, hey, would you forego a raise this cost of living to keep everybody whole? I'm guessing a reasonable person would have said, yeah, I could live with that for the next 2 years. We understand that's tight. But that question wasn't asked, and the unions maybe didn't want to go along with that, even if it was asked. So there's those things right there. Do you have any questions on anything I've said so far? I know I've covered a lot.
I wanted to hear about the transportation package, so thank you for addressing that.
Okay. Those are the big plans. They go, what are you doing? They'll be back there. They'll be back. And I think you're just going to see a skinny version. And then they'll start looking at the accountability portion and long term, what ODOT looks like and what is the vision of ODOT? What do we want to have? Do you break out major projects team, or it's just major projects that they are actually in the office? Because right now they're not in the office. You need to have an engineer, everybody sitting in a room at least 3 if not 4 days a week, having a conversation about what these major projects look like. I mean, I'm talking major projects. We started out the I-5 bridge, bonded $1 billion for that in 23. And they said, oh, it'd be around maybe $6 billion. I'm guessing we'll sniff 10 billion by the time they figure out what they're gonna do the I-5 bridge. So costs are real, project labor agreements are real, prevailing wage is real. All of those things are cost drivers. And when you have some of these mega projects with these PLAs on them, that's a 30% increase when it comes to labor. Because I am a union guy coming through. I was in the police union for 25.5 years, but project labor agreements, when you have open shops versus closed shops, that creates disparity, and that actually is there's some minority businesses that are not going to be able to compete for those contracts, and it's wrong. So there's that. Where's that at? What else we got? Insurance trace policy package. Let's see. I got my notes rolling a fire. We all know that was a bad thing that happened. One of the concerns out of that talking to people there was my concerns as a city planner, or a city planning commissioners, Cascade Locks, was understanding gorge, understanding building codes. Those homes that were there were built with the codes at the time, and my concern is the gorge commission is going to come in, may come in and say, well, we have to build the new codes. That's going to price people out. That was affordable living where there was a lot of single wide homes, manufactured homes that were there that people lost. I toured it with the sheriff and used the fire got so hot you can see where there's just molten aluminum and come down off of these structures, just laying on the ground, it's cooled out aluminum. And so my hope is that will they allow them to build them to the condition that they were before, being presentable and up to modern standards, but not having a requirement of a tin roof or a metal roof, which is what you want for fireproofing. So the embers will come on top of your roof for cause of fire. But they want to add, when you build a house in the gorge with a metal roof, they want to put a certain glaze over the top of it so it doesn't reflect as you're driving by for that 2 seconds and maybe blind you on the freeway, or just have this blinding reflection when the sun's moving a certain direction. And that adds costs. And I'm not talking you want a couple of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars of cost to put those coatings on the roofs and things like that. So same with the windows. There's a lot of these regulations that I think they can look at and go, yes, we can abate those, but we can abate those for right now to get the existing home into at least most of the requirements. Because when you were talking about fireproofing your homes and creating that fire grate and being wise in your property, and you cut this tree down, cut that tree down, cut this tree down. Worst case, whoa, we can't cut those trees down. You have to say, wait a minute, the fire map said I have to cut these down to create this buffer so I don't put my house down. But yet now I can't. So those are those conflicting things that are out there. I think are a problem. Okay. It's which one do you want, which one do you don't? My concern is you're gonna see people from California and other places that will buy those lots, and we'll lose those and we'll have these little mansions out there, and then the lost the ability to have affordable housing or housing in these middle type of houses. Let's see, cherry growers, they're having a rough year this year, the market, and hoping our local economy when it comes to the fruit and the pear growers here don't have the same concerns, but I'll wait and see. Fruit looks good on the tree right now. Fire that recall. Got away with those, and then we're able to fund fire 92. Credit tax. It was a tax. It was in packets. People shoot back, but now they didn't do it in packets. The industry wanted it. They said yes, taxes on tin, 65 cents on tin. That paid for wildfire funding. Not the full complement, but it did pay for it a little bit. And so that rolls into the next thing. Earlier or late last year, we had a special session for wildfire funding. We had to use funding from the e-board to basically come out of the rainy day fund and pay for all the wildfires that happened that year. Special session, appropriate those dollars so you can actually get the dollars paid out. There's several people here, several people in our community that are firefighters, that own companies that firefight, and they weren't getting paid. That's here, like I got cable, I need to do some things to help me out. So we were able to get that done in, it was December, it was December when the special session happened. So we got that done. Some other for me, the end of session wrap ups, we talked about the River Bridge. So what a lot of people don't realize, I have the most beautiful district here in the river centric. I do have Gresham. In Gresham, we were able to secure $8 million for their fire hall or fire station, which Gresham is happy to come out and cover and create the minimum of understanding of the what do you call that? It's lost in Mutual aid, and they came out and helped with fire out, and we did that stuff on fall when I fired, so they did a really good job there. They're able to get that done. Cascade Locks, so community to the west of us, they during the Eagle Creek wildfire. They went to go rebuild, and FEMA came in along some other organizations and said, you take your power lines, put them underground, and put them through here, and then stick them out to go out to Boston, Warrendale and stuff. That'd be awesome. Make less fire hazard, less risk. Sure, it sounds great. He did it. But came back last year and says, hey, remember when you did that? Yep. You gotta redo that bridge now. So you need to move the line. You're gonna pay for it yourself and install it back where it was. Right? So enough people had left and cycled out of city and out. The new city manager or administrator was there, didn't quite understand the whole complexity of that. Got stuck with $1 million bill, so they had to be able to get $1 million for them to help recover those costs because ODOT was playing hardball and everybody grumpy about it. Like, come on, people, they put it where you said put it. Now you're telling me you gotta move it so you can fix your bridge, you should be able to do that. And the other thing that was surprised that I was on the list that it got blended was because of Representative Knows, because he does the arts and cultures. Mount Hood Cultural Center and Museum in Montgomery Camp at $450,000 for their expansion and to preserve what they have right there. So that was kind of those some good. For as tough as our economy was, got some good take homes, and I really very appreciative of that. The last ditch effort with the transportation package, kind of circle back that. I was part of those conversations. They weren't in the basement. We had a bunch of people in the room trying to figure out how to solve this, how to fix this, and come up with different ideas. I will never ever not take the invitation up to sit at the table, because if you're not sitting at the table, you're gonna win. If you're on the menu, that's a bad place to be. A bad place to be. So I appreciate those opportunities. I've worked across the aisle, a lot of good stuff, and it's just. Yeah, I think you guys have seen my body of work. I'll stand behind that Measure 110, typically finance reform, all our housing stuff that we've done. You just have to have conversations. You don't need to sit there and gaslight, those things all the time. So I just have to style leadership. With that, any questions?
Thanks, Ken, Representative. Anything else?
You have a question.
Go ahead.
Back on the funding for the bridge for the White City River Bridge, I'm just curious if there's any contingencies or strings attached to that bridge funding. For example, if the feds don't come through with funding, what happens to the funding that was pledged by the state?
If project falls through, it'll go back. It'll go back. Maybe that's the way that's just the way that the contracts go there. Hey, your funding's here, great, then it's pulled back and can't get into a reasonable solution, we should pull back, we'll try to pull back.
Are there any other contingencies?
I don't think either state went with another 600 million. That's a lot of bonding, and we don't have bonding capacity at this point. So, yeah, that's the best answer I got for it.
Or
That's it. That's easy. Better be in the committee. I know you guys earlier, it was awesome to talk with you. Just so you know, not every city has their own obvious. The Cascade Locks City had one, they ended up hiring one on. But this person sitting right behind me, she does a tremendous job for you guys. She's in my office, on my ear, about the jurisdictional transfers. Well, that's the other thing, jurisdictional transfer. That was in the original transportation package. That wasn't widely advertised, you say, because Southern River and Fall. And Fall Boulevards were the two things, which was Leader Bowman at the time, and I was leader coverage. When I was leader at the time, those are those things that were going to be funded maybe in that project. Still trying to figure out some workarounds to get some funding for that, because I know you guys are going to take over the highway. You got the curb outs, there's a lot of moving parts with that. So Alan and I sat down all together today and trying to figure out a game plan moving forward and leveraging the dollars that may be available now, so we don't, guys don't lose those. It's the best way to spend those, but I'm just here to be the cheerleader and just lead into things where I can to help these guys out and move forward. But you gotta know when it comes to lobbyists. I know lobbyists it's bad, so especially because they're representing you, the city and community here, to get the public dollars, the tax dollars back to our communities. So they do a good job.
Thank you. All right.
Thanks.
Good evening, Mayor and the council members. Thank you, Representative Hubbard, for all those words. My name is Ellen Miller, and I'm with Val Oregon. I am your contract lobbyist, and I'm pretty sure I'm the only person wearing heels today in the river. Just my free survey, I'm pretty sure. I just wanted to thank again Representative Helfrich for his work. And thank you all for allowing me to represent you and my team to represent you in Salem. It was really a great experience, despite not getting the transportation package across the finish line. I also wanted to thank Councilor Polson. Hi, Councilor Polson. Thank you for coming down to Salem. Councilor Polson came down and legislators and really advocated for the jurisdictional transfer of the Heights, which you know was kind of our priority. First, I want to say just what I thought, from my perspective, what was a little bit different about this session, and Representative Helfrich touched on a couple of these. There was new leadership this session. There was a fear of recession. There was a number of placeholders, of course, the federal uncertainty, and then as Rep. Helfrich said, our revenue forecast was down. I have not been in a legislative session when the revenue forecast is actually down for the final forecast for session. So that was very difficult. We were told early on that money was going to be tight, it was going to be difficult. But we were all hopeful that, that it would start out, that we'd be okay this session, and start to brace ourselves for following sessions. The advocacy that we did for Hood River prior to session, we really wanted to make sure to capitalize on that jurisdictional transfer advisory council recommendation for both Tigard and Hood River. And so we early on formed a coalition with Tigard. We met with leadership, we met with the co-chairs of Ways and Means, or the budget writers. And it became very clear that it was going to be, our best chance was going to be getting into the transportation package versus a separate special appropriation or capital construction. So we worked hard with the key legislators on the committee, the co-chairs of the transportation committee, the staff that were drafting the bill, and also with the street trust. I cannot express how grateful we were for that partnership and their work to really get the jurisdictional transfer as part of the package as it was moving forward during the session. So what the way that it kind of crafted was that the jurisdictional transfer fund would be in the Great Streets Fund. So it was changing the Great Streets Fund to have a dedicated funding source and then to queue the jurisdictional transfer. So it prioritized, this was language that we were able to get, again, bill didn't pass, but we were successful getting the language, and we were in a good place to prioritize projects that would facilitate jurisdictional transfer. And of course, the Heights project is one of those. So we were in a good place. Unfortunately, the votes weren't there. Session ended early, and now there is the talk of a special session. I've heard anywhere from the end of July, which I'm pretty sure is next week, or August, in attempts of doing what's considered a Band-Aid fix, a Band-Aid bill. That would be a short-term bill to help prevent the layoffs at ODOT, and that's really what the focus would be. So from early conversations that I've had, the jurisdictional transfer or the Great Streets program is not included in that, nor are the APR projects or the big projects that Representative Helfrich was talking about. So this is going to be, if the governor does call a special session, which I think is likely, I don't know exactly, but I think it is likely that it will happen possibly before September. It will be much pared down transportation package. So we will continue to advocate through LOC, because LOC also sees the importance of getting the Great Streets program funded. And during future sessions, 2026 will be very difficult, as you all know. The state is currently working on its response to the federal actions or Congress HR 1, or we call it the reconciliation bill. What the state has to do in response to that, and I think that given the potential of a revenue forecast being even further down because of the Intel layoffs and other economic drivers, that 2026 will be a session that will be mainly reactive, and we might see some budget cuts at agencies. So it will be very difficult to get funding for projects or anything that would facilitate jurisdictional transfer. But we're continuing to have conversations with ODOT and with legislators' offices to talk through what maybe other options the city might have. But I do recognize that you're going to have a difficult decision in front of you as far as the timeline for the jurisdictional transfer and for the Heights project. So we're trying to work within that timeline and try to come up with something to enable you to take on that roadway, because it is a great liability. Since we were in the building, you had me as your contract lobbyist. We also provided bill tracking. There's a lot of information about bills. This does not in any way replace the LOC report. That is going to be a much more comprehensive report. We were really focused on the jurisdictional transfer. But since we were in the building, we were able to do a couple other fixes that needed to be done while the legislature was in town. One of those was to enable the money to come in for the Mariposa Village. There was a little hang up in the business development department. So that was able to be fixed and hopefully is being facilitated. I haven't got an update, but I think everything's good there. And then we were also able to do a fix for you around the middle income housing revolving loan fund, or you could say the MERL. We were able to find a way that cities like Hood River could use revenue to pay back that revolving fund. So those were just two things that, because we were there, we could get done, which was great to feel like we got that done, because it was very disappointing on the last day of session to realize that the transportation package wasn't moving forward. So what's next is potentially this special session. Then we're going to be having some what's called interim legislative days. These are just informational hearings. Again, I believe that the informational hearings in both September and either late November, early December will be focused on the state's response to federal actions. We'll also have the federal budget by that time. So I think those are going to be the primary conversations. Money is going to be really difficult to come by. It makes it really difficult to go to the legislature for an ask. But we do think that there is opportunity for broader conversation around the transportation package, probably in 2027, which sounds really far away right now, but we're hopeful. So I don't think I have anything else, but I'm open to any questions.
Thank you, Al.
They always talk about making the sausage. Thank you for knowing how to navigate the legislative process to advocate for our interests. It's so important to our city. We're glad to have you.
Thank you, and I want to thank Will and Abigail too for being great and coming down to Salem. It really makes a difference when legislators hear from you all directly. So just encourage you to continue having those conversations with legislators and keep them updated. Meet regularly.
Thanks again. Okay.
Thank you.
Now we will have feedback from the audience. This is a time when anyone can sign up to tell city council what they'd like to for 3 minutes. And we have first Steve and then Jeanette. So come on up, Steve. Jen, you got the timer?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm a visual art teacher. And the picture is worth 1,000 words. Rowena. Hood River, Wyatt. We're doing 10,000 acres and we're doing right now. Nothing survives unless it's metal or concrete, and that's what I'll put out for now. I'm not gonna get to this packet. I'm reverse to Jerry Hess's. I was here 7 months ago for not when. If it's not it, but when we're in trouble, I mean, talking about money issues and what. So in your packet, you've got the things I want to cover today. Charles Young's report that includes, he added 5 things that had to do with the Indian Creek watershed area. 3,500 acres, 50 years of fuel, very steep, and nothing's being done on it. the last time I was here, I talked to the city, and thank you, Paul, thank you, Abigail, thank you. Simone wrote a $4,500, 4,000, excuse me. Okay. Thank you for all the work. So after talking to you, last time, Charles and Simone wrote a $4,500,000 grant for the Indian Creek watershed. You know, that included mitigation, fire, clearing, breaks, you know, to make it safe. And it got shot down. She got the grant all wrote 32 pages, it just, and then, and now she has moved on to represent the coast, and so we're losing a very valuable representative who knows this area. Charles, you know, it's like, the sheriff is cutting the program there, and how much of that's gonna affect him. He's been excellent, you know, just in supporting. Gosh, Rowena, 59 houses, 90 outbuildings. Somebody said the cure prevention is cheaper than the cure. You know, and these pictures here, again, you know, the only thing that's left is this toxic powder. It's going into the land, it's blowing all over the place, it's a mess. And so you got the Indian Creek area, and nothing's being done. Nothing is being done, and you walk on that thing, there's fuel everywhere, everywhere you look, there's rattling everywhere. So I've talked to everybody along the edge, on my edge, you know, I've given out, this is an excellent report, we should get those to every citizen in this city, you know, it's just lots of information on how do you protect your house, how do you work with your neighbors, how do you support, and then how do you get politically and socially active and making sure that happens here. There's the group called Firewise, you know, but there's only like 10 groups, and there's 10 people in each group, and that's 100 people for the valley and the city, and there's what, 2,320,000 people in the whole thing. You know, there's not enough people, and we're not talking about it enough. Oops, I guess that's I'm out of here, huh?
You could wrap it up. Thank you, Steve.
Okay, so anyway, how do we educate people? How do we activate people? And where do we get the money from? And I want to suggest that we got to take local money, because the feds and the state aren't going to be available. So how do we tax people, and how do we get more people involved? And how do we have these people all over the city, so that, you know, and put a QR code in there, so you go there and it'll tell you what to do and how to do it and where to go. I've got tons of ideas and everything like that. And I'm just looking for people to help and support, you know, how do I support you, and how can we work together? Because embers go 2-3 miles, okay, so everything that's 2 miles from the watershed area is gonna, and that's the whole city, you know, and they figure it's what, $20,000 to $70,000 to clean up a mess. So imagine 250, 300 houses, you know, and that's what's going all over the place. Anyway, bottom line is, I love the river. You know, and I really, this is my home, and it's my physical space, my spiritual space. And I love the animals, and it's like magic. I travel all over the world, and there's wonderful people everywhere. And so how do we come together in spite of all the other stuff that's going on, and nurture and support and help each other? So
Thank you, Steve. Thanks for being a good advocate. Jeanette, and then Mike. We can leave that there. We'll pick that up later. Okay, Jeanette, please come on.
Hello, my name is Jeanette Sparta. I am a licensed taxi driver for Hood River Evening Taxi, owned by Eddie Garvin, aka Eddie Cumming. I'm here to talk about the city ordinance, chapter 5.20, that you guys put so much thought and work into to create something that significantly or specifically addresses the TNCs. I'm going to ask you to start enforcing it. It's been over 3 months. All of us licensed taxi drivers regularly see many Uber drivers regularly picking up passengers in town without permits. We've talked to many of them. We've told them about the ordinance. We suggest they go to City Hall, get licensed, be in compliance, or dismiss. And as far as I know, no permits have been issued. Could the police at least start to track and contact these drivers and inform them about the ordinance? We can easily send them tips, pictures, you see them right in front of the video. Or could they track them on their own using the app? It's really easy. There's still a lot of confusion in the community about private transportation marketplace. We feel enforcing this ordinance would be helpful. Also, I understand that the ordinance still does not address penalties for violators. I believe the old penalty was $500 or 30 days in jail. So I'm asking you to amend the ordinance to create reasonable penalties for people who violate what you all have decided is necessary. That's it.
Thank you, Jeanette.
You're welcome.
That's good. Mike?
Saying you saved us for last, I'm not sure we did in this case, to be honest with you, but I do only need 2 of your minutes, so that's good news, I think. So I wrote it out, so I'll stay within my 2 minutes. Nice to see you all again. I was here a few months ago when you were having the Dark Sky International Week, which I really greatly appreciated. And I'm here again about talking about night skies, but this time I have some good news, and I don't think you've heard this news before, so I think this is new for you. I've looked at the plans for the updated development code, and I know that in module 4, there's going to be a section on outdoor lighting. Of course, that's what people like me want, so that's great, happy about that. My thought though, when I read that was, oh my gosh, that's a lot of work. Someone has to develop this module to put in there. Well, it turns out that's not really true. It turns out that Sisters Oregon has done a whole lot of the work for you already, and you can just build off of that. So about 2 years ago, Sisters wanted to update its outdoor code, and they hired probably the best outdoor lighting guy in the country, a guy named John Barentine from Arizona, well-known guy. He worked with Sisters for a while, it all went well, everybody agreed on the standards, the city council approved them unanimously, and they're now in effect. And I, for the last year or so, have been talking with the point man in Sisters, a guy named Scott Woodford. He's their, what's his title exactly? Community Development Director. And Scott is a really great guy. He says, steal our standards. Use them wholesale. Use whatever parts you want. We don't care. Good for you. And he also says, if you want to talk with me about it, we can Zoom together. Maybe I come down. He's very open. And I thought one of the best parts, because Sisters is a great place. He's invited people from Hood River to come up for a field visit. If you want to come up, he'll get the mayor together. He'll get all the people together who worked on it in Sisters. You can ask any questions you want. And just last week, he made that offer again. So all I want to say today is, I mean, I'm well aware that the development code is not about outdoor lighting. I know it's a small part of it. I agree with that. And I know it's going to be a while before you deal with that. But I just wanted to stick in the back of your mind that there's this resource of what Sisters did that I think could be very, very useful to you. That's it. Thanks very much.
Appreciate it.
Oh, and I'll just say, should I maybe have a second, I don't know.
Yeah.
Here's the Sisters code. It's 5 pages, and as it needs to be, it's very detailed and it's very technical because it has to be enforced. But I think that's pretty technical. So I wrote this thing, which I hope you've gotten already. Somewhere here. Key aspects of their dark skies. And I ran this by Scott Woodford in Sisters last week to say, do I have it right? And he says, I do have it right. So this will give you what I call the Cliff's Notes of what Sisters did, but Sisters is very open to helping us in any way we will.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you all very much.
We now have a very long consent agenda. I would entertain a motion.
May have a correction. As part of the notes. So I wasn't present for the last meeting and it said that I abstained from a vote. I think I should be excluded. So
Thank you.
I can point out exactly to where that's
Councilor Stupina, so this is a correction to the minutes from June 23rd, is that right? Though?
correct, not June 23rd. I will find it and point it out to Jen, but just want to make note of it.
But
I marked it.
good, so that there will be a correction regarding Councilor Stupina.
Thank you.
And I would entertain a motion.
I'll move that we approve the consent agenda, subject to the correction to the meeting minutes or the minutes request.
Moved by Cavallari,
Second.
second by Ben. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Chair votes aye, motion passes. Thank you. Rand Road, Will.
This is the.
It is not green, but it's not red either. It's just, Grant, can you hear Will?
Yeah, I can hear everything fine.
Okay, so it seems like it's, it's spinning blue at the moment, which I've never once seen, so stand by.
Yeah, the sound I'm getting, I think, is through other people's microphones, I think.
Thank you, Grant.
But yeah, we fixed that earlier.
Okay.
All right, you got a moment.
Yeah. Mayor Blackburn, members of the city council, come to you asking for contract authority tonight for some excavation work that will help the city staff negotiate hopefully a quick and amicable resolution to an issue that's causing some potential construction delays and added cost to Mariposa Village. So Mariposa Village is under construction now, and they're working on site preparation, including building of retaining walls. There was an issue with unpermitted fill that was brought to our attention a while back, where a neighbor to the south, not to the west, but to the south, a small parcel that's just building one house, trucked in some fill without a permit, and it spilled over onto the city's property and now, which is Community Development Partners property. So we've been working with the property owner through code enforcement, but also trying to get voluntary compliance for some time. But unfortunately, we are running close to a deadline where if we don't get this fill situation taken care of, it's going to make Community Development Partners change their construction sequencing, likely add costs, potentially add some delays as well, which is very expensive. And so we can continue along a code enforcement stance with this property owner, but that could take several months to come to a resolution. So wanted to bring the option to the council. If you'd like to give us the approval to do so. CDP said that Community Development Partners said that they would pay half the cost if the city would pay the other half the cost to just pay an excavator, come in, remove the offending fill if the property owner would allow us to do so on a voluntary and immediate basis. So we solicited bids. We did receive 3 bids. And all of them have been under $100,000. So we think we're going to have savings over what is in your packet. But we're asking for your direction, whether or not we can have the latitude to try to achieve this quick and amicable resolution, or continue on through kind of the normal code enforcement process and means to get this issue deemed a nuisance and get an abatement order and kind of go through that whole process. So it's very quick and abbreviated, but I'd be happy to answer any questions. I also don't need to go into any more detail than we need to.
Thank you, Will. It seems to me we're in one of these time is money situations. I appreciate your managing this. Questions for Will? Anna?
Can you explain a little bit the process by which you are negotiating voluntary compliance with this paper?
Yeah, we've been in contact and notified them of violation, that they're not in keeping with engineering standards, asked them to remediate. They've made some progress in removing some of the fill. There was fill that was very much spilling over onto our property. They've scooped most all of that back. There's still a little bit on Community Development Partners property. And just what's left on their side of the property is too steep and it creates too much loading to build a retaining wall around now. So we have gotten some engagement and compliance, but not complete cooperation. And so we hope that providing a ready-made solution to this property owner could get us to a quicker path. So.
And follow-up question. What's the likelihood of, since you had communications with them in the past, with the neighbor in the past, do we have any indication that an offer to resolve the issue with his authorization would actually allow us to go ahead and take care of this, and if so, what kind of time period is that?
Yeah, so if we get approved tonight, I'll be working to get contact him immediately tomorrow and giving until the end of the week to give us an answer, yes or no. I have telegraphed this as a potential possibility, but it was always dependent upon the bids and dependent upon contract authority. So it's not a surprise, but I don't have any I don't have any yes or no yet. If I do, if this is not amenable and doesn't get us to a quick resolution, we'll be going the municipal court route anyway.
So that's our plan B, but support. So thank you very much.
Other questions? Amanda?
I'm sorry if I missed this in the write-up, but is it something like if they agree and we perform the work that we could bill them for? Like get them to pay for some or all of it at some point, like because we had to do this work on their behalf, or is this if we pay for it, we're just taking that as our cost?
That's the bargain that gets us to a immediate and voluntary conclusion to this issue. Is this is the no cost option. The other option is fines, court orders, posting liens, all that bad stuff. But we want to make this is the carrot and it's the easy button and no cost.
So basically, just for the people at home watching, it is considered to be more financially feasible or less expensive to do it this way as opposed to delaying and potentially increasing the cost of the Mariposa Village project if we were to wait and have their construction schedule disrupted. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, thank you for really crystallizing that and summarizing. This is the least cost option, and CDP is willing to contribute money and help pay because it will, if it works, reduce the overall cost for the project.
I would entertain a motion.
And so in the motion in there, you can change 125 to 100, and you don't have to have any of the emergency language because we did get 3 bids.
Well, can you say that again?
Yeah, sorry. So the suggested motion on page 135, where it says 125,000, you can scratch that and say 100,000. And everything, kind of the last line where it says, and to authorize an emergency procurement if fewer than 3 bids for this work are received, all that could be struck. And I will note that the winning bidder is the lowest bidder is the one who is on site right now doing the work, which makes sense because they're already mobilized. And they did come in far lower than 100,000. But and the other bids, but we want to maintain flexibility to review and make sure, because they are so much lower, really make sure that they understood what they were bidding on and we're getting what we're asking for. But it is luckily going to be significantly less expensive.
I move to authorize the city manager to select the lowest responsible bid and execute a contract not to exceed $100,000 for excavation work, contingent on the community development partners reimbursing half the cost.
Moved by Stefano. Second by Gaki. Any further discussion? All in favor?
I,
Opposed? Chair votes aye, motion passes. I've been hearing about this as it's been unfolding over the last like nearly hours and days and weeks. So thank you, staff, for scrambling and managing and taking care of it. IGA with McCack.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate that. And I should mention that it's actually not an intergovernmental agreement. It's actually simply a fairly informal funding agreement that has been requested by Mid-Columbia Community Action Council, or MCAC. And it simply commits us to money we have already budgeted for this fiscal year and doesn't actually speak to future years. But while I have you for a minute, just give you a quick update on MCAC. They of course run our the Hood River shelter, the seasonal shelter that starts in November, ends usually in March or April. I would note that I think I've shared already that they had appointed Kyle Bray as their new deputy director. And I just heard this last week that Leslie Naramore, who has been their interim director, has been appointed as their permanent executive director. So happy to have her at the helm. Of course, she was with WAGAP in Washington, so she knows the gorge and she knows our community well. And she has asked to speak to you at a future meeting. So I think we've got her scheduled for September 22nd. So happy to answer any questions, but looking for, there's a motion in the packet and I know Councillor Cavallari has some comments.
I need to recuse myself from this as I represent the CAC as their legal counsel.
Great, thank you.
I move that we authorize the city manager to sign the funding agreement with MCAC for shelter services in Hood River.
Moved by Ben.
Second.
Second by Doug. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Abstentions? Any opposed? Chair votes aye. 1, 2, 3, 4. Grant, did we get an aye? I'm sorry.
you move quick, Paul. Yes, I.
Aye. 5 in favor. Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Discussion items. Phase 2 Development Code.
Thank you, Mayor and councilors. For tonight's work session, we are joined by Matt Hasty, consulting firm MIG. In January, Matt provided you with the initial findings from the first phase of the project, that was the code audit. We're now in phase 2 of the project, the code update. And last month, Matt and his colleague Carrie Brennicky reviewed several documents with you, including a memo that described the approach to organizing the development code based on the state's model code for small cities. And went through the first of 4 batches of code that are being drafted. We'll refer to that as module 1. And that was the introduction and general provisions of the development code, focusing on the purpose and authority and definitions. Tonight, Matt will describe the components of module 2, which addresses zoning and land division application review procedures and criteria. The council's packet includes a PDF labeled Meeting Packet Part 2 tonight, and that includes a cover sheet with some background, and it also outlines 9 or 10 questions or issues. You've also got draft code for those application review procedures and approval criteria with some light blue boxes that highlight the same questions. And there's a table at the end that summarizes the city's application procedures and potential procedures as we move forward in this project. Some of these questions are going to be difficult for some folks to respond to. I understand that not everybody has experience with development code review procedures and criteria. A couple of you were on the planning commission. Others may have had some experience working with the development code, the current code, or just spent some time reviewing it. So if anything jumped out at you as you went through the packet, reviewing materials, or if you've got any initial impressions, we're interested in any feedback you could share. The staff may also jump in with some suggestions during the discussion. In any case, we'll have an opportunity to review this information, these procedures in the winter, when we've got a comprehensive draft code package. We move out of the modules and into a more comprehensive package. See that maybe January or February. As a reminder, this is not a public hearing. Hearings to review proposed code updates are expected in the spring of 2026. At this time, for members of the public who are interested in participating. They're welcome to provide feedback through the project and website. They can keyword search on the internet, Hood River Code Update, and scroll down to the bottom of the page where they can find a portal to submit information. We also expect to begin some interviews and small group discussions this fall. Dustin, anything else you want to go over before Matt takes over? Okay. Matt, with that, we'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Kevin. Can you all hear me okay there?
Yeah, sounds good, Matt. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. I will share my screen similar to what I did last time I was with you and start to walk through this presentation. So I just got kind of a few introductory slides here that I'm going to talk about in terms of a status report for the project, just a recap on how we've organized these 4 batches of code amendments or modules, as Kevin mentioned. And then just a quick summary of kind of what the topics are or what the sections are within this module 2. And then we'll walk through this set of discussion questions, similar to what we did last time I was with you. And as Kevin said, these are pretty meaty and technical questions. And so, you know, it's totally fine if y'all don't have answers to all these questions. We're just interested in whatever feedback you have, as Kevin said. And so when we get to the questions, I'll sort of preface the question with a little bit of context, ask the question, and then we'll see Kevin or Dustin or your attorney, Dan Kearns, may have something to add to what I say. So, so that's kind of how we will proceed. So in terms of just kind of our schedule and status report, I'm not going to say too much about this, you know, just note that this is an iterative process. As Kevin said, we're working on these batches. We like to think of them as bite-sized, but they're really big bites, you know, maybe like a big plate size chunk of code at a time or something. But we're trying to do this in a way that's not handing you the whole thing at once, at least. But once we've gotten through the process of reviewing each of these 4 modules, we will go through a process of combining them, addressing connections between them, and addressing the comments that we've heard from you all on the Planning Commission and staff. So before we have kind of another round of discussion about them. So we're still relatively early in this process. And after tonight, we'll be kind of about halfway through these modules, although I will say that as long as your memo was for module 2, 3, and 4 might be even a little longer, I hate to say, but they're all going to be pretty meaty from here on out. So I'll stop there. Just kind of a reminder of the way these are organized. The first one that we talked about last time, as Kevin said, had to do with the way the code is intended to be organized. And the introduction to the code and some of the sections that would be in kind of the first overall section. Tonight, we're focused on number 2, which is all about application procedures, including land divisions and other types of procedures. And then 3 and 4 will get into standards that are applied in different zones, as well as community design and land division standards in the 4th batch of code updates. So the things that are embedded in the document that you got in advance of this meeting, and we're not going to talk about all these things in detail. We're really just going to try to talk through these questions that we sent you that were in the cover sheet that Kevin mentioned. But the things that are covered in this section: procedure types and processes, site design review, land divisions of property line adjustments, conditional use permits, modifications to approved plans and conditions. You've already approved something and somebody wants to come in and make a change to that. Amendments to the zoning map or the code, adjustments and variances, plan unit developments, and historic preservation procedures. And we do have questions about a number of these topics, but I don't think every single one. So that's just kind of a quick review of what's in the document you got. Some of the sources of information, I talked last time a little bit about this, the state transportation and growth management model code for small cities. That's a source for us of some of the code provisions, as well as, of course, your existing code and some recent code updates we've worked on for other cities, particularly updates where our intent or part of our job has been to make sure standards are clear and objective as they relate to housing,
or to other types of development. And of course, discussions with Kevin and Dustin and our team. So it's kind of where this information is coming from. And so some of the things that are addressed in that cover sheet, and I'm going to be walking through the information in that cover sheet in a moment, I and the other folks working on this. What are some appropriate levels of public notice and review? What types of things ought to have a higher level of that? We have some questions related to neighborhood meeting requirements, thresholds for change of use applications, as well as site design review. We want to ask you a little bit about procedures for annexations, what kind of process that goes through, and kind of where those procedures live within the larger City of Hood River Municipal Code. Talk a little bit about adjustment processes. We have some things to say about planned unit developments. Not a lot of questions there, but just want to kind of frame the expectation of how those provisions would be used in the future. And then we have a question for you about historic landmarks and a potential change to that part of your code. So those are the topics. Maybe I will take just a quick pause before I dive into the questions and see if you have any questions for me before we get going.
As long as we at some point remember to talk about historic landmarks, because we have a landmarks review board and at times we have flubbed incorporating their input, and I want to make sure that we make a different mistake this time.
Okay. All right. Yeah, we will definitely have, I think that'll be sort of the last section or subsection of tonight's code batch that we talk about our historic landmarks review procedures. We have a specific question for you about that, but we're happy to talk about other aspects of that if there were things that kind of popped up for you when you reviewed that, or just things that you've come across and, like you say, don't want to repeat in the future. So yeah, happy to talk about that. And that is one of the pieces we're looking at tonight.
Did you want to speak at this moment? Okay. Oh, got it. Okay, carry on.
All right. You say keep going?
Yeah, carry on.
Oh, carry on. Thank you. Sorry. All right. So this first question that we posed in the cover sheet had to do with what we've described as type 1 and type 2 decisions. So right now, this is sort of a new, it's not exactly a new approach, but it's some new nomenclature for your code. So you don't really have type 1 procedures now, but what you do have are ministerial actions. And those are akin to type 1 procedures. Those are applications and decisions where the decisions are made by staff. They rely on clear and objective standards. They tend to be fairly minor things, fence permits, duplexes or single family dwellings on existing established lots. But there is the expectation based on housing legislation over the last few years that more types of applications are likely to need to go through a process like this, a type 1 process. The type 2 process also generally is a staff level decision, but it can be appealed. It requires the preparation of more significant or substantial findings. It also those processes, type 2 processes, require public notice to neighboring property owners. And there is, I think I said, the ability to appeal, still basing things on clear and objective standards, but just a higher level of review and notices and findings. And so our question here is, we've started to lay out sort of our thoughts about which types of procedures would fall under a type 1 or a type 2 or 3 or 4 actually process in the table that's the last part of your packet. That's a list of different review application types and review procedure types. And I think from staff's perspective, there's a pretty big jump between type 1 and type 2 procedures, less in some ways sort of important and more maybe clear cut between 2 and 3. And there's a limited number of things that are type 4 procedures. So I think the question is, if you all had a chance to look through that table, was there anything that jumped out at you that was shown as a type 2 procedure that you think could go through a type 1 process? Could be, wouldn't need to go through a public notice process, wouldn't need to be quite as intensive in terms of public notice and staff review and ability to appeal. So and this is maybe one of the meatiest questions we have here. So I'm sorry to start out with this one. But just wanted to pose that question for you all. And I'll stop here and just see if Dustin or Kevin or Dan have anything to add to this one.
Justin.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Matt. Just as a, to back up slightly, the difference in what we have in our code today, really, we do not define land use approvals or land division by this type 1, type 2, type 3. That's a very common theme in Oregon land use and planning administration. The type 1 for you all and for everyone at home is really similar to getting a building permit. There's no public outreach, there's no notice to the neighbors. It happens on a technical level, it is reviewed through our technical staff exclusively, and there's no participation. You meet the rules, it's technical, you go through. Building a home, single family dwelling, building a permit, expanding your home, often looks like that. It differs greatly from when we move to the type 2 process, or what we refer to as an administrative process, where although there may not be a hearing, the big change is there's notice to the neighbors, there's an opportunity to comment, there's an opportunity to participate in the decision. Staff writes findings, typically anywhere between 15 and 50 pages. It can last up to 120 days by law. And it is a fully immersed process where people are allowed to participate and appeal if they feel the process has gone wrong. So as time has shifted, the difference between those permit, more things have merged into the permit process. And people would argue that by way of ease and efficiency, that is, they want to be there. They want to move those things that are relatively routine, that want to be expedited into that process. And the state has moved some of those things into that batch, regardless of what the city thinks. Duplexes will now be allowed. Certain land divisions will automatically be allowed, you have no choice. So as council has talked about its housing strategies and some of its development, some of the goals of this process to improve the efficiency of the code, there's an opportunity here to start thinking about, are there more things that we want to make a technical review than have been there now? And that's really the big push. The categorization is kind of numerical, and it's somewhat of an organization tactic. I can tell you, our building permits are type 1. Our administrative approvals are type 2. We call them subject to standards, limited land use decisions. Generally, things are permitted. However, we check the boxes, we do the review, people get an opportunity to audit our board and comment. Type 3 goes to a planning commission. Type 4 goes to you all. It's a legislative process. We change the rules, we change the code, we change the boundaries. You're there as policymakers. So generally speaking, what we're really looking at here is, are there any thoughts or feelings that you have as this code comes back to you in 12 to 16 months? Or is there anything that you feel like you would like to shift into the local bucket, into that permit only bucket? It's not a democratic process. It's not participation. It's yes and no.
Thank you. Comments?
Yeah. I have a couple questions. So you're saying that our current code doesn't have type 1. I'm wondering if you can provide some context as to why it doesn't and what the advantages are to adding type 1.
There's things that we do in a similar, it's just not a permanent standard. So the reason why it doesn't have it is just simply not standard. You have uses that are permitted subject to standards. You build a house in an R1 zone, it meets the length, width, height. It's single family dwelling, it's permitted. There's just no real, the code does not outline how that happens. It just says it happens. And so it's just not, the process isn't articulated. Why is it not in there? We just chose not to. We call it permitted uses in 1983. So I guess the explanation is it just never was organized that way, as much as, and in that time it became a little more
a normal convention of organization for Oregon land use municipalities to call their type 1, type 2. It just, it was a process that emerged over time. So, us using it, I mean, you can put things that you want to declare are permitted by or reviewed under this thing. Additions, fences, things that don't need a building permit. There's certain items that will go in there no matter what, because you have no say. Home occupations would be one that do you want to have an opportunity to review that? Certain tenant changes could be things that we have a documentation for, we're gonna need a permit, we want a zoning review for it. Those would be some examples of items that would be kind of lumped into the routine, non-discretionary bucket.
I think based on the table that's here, I thought home occupations was one that would fall under type 2. But things like boundary line adjustments that would be type 1, and hosted home shares and vacation home rentals. What you're saying is type 1 doesn't require notice to neighbors.
Correct.
And doesn't warrant public comment or feedback. Right now, these items don't require, because I personally have received notice of a boundary line adjustment from a neighbor.
Partition is different. So a boundary line adjustment meets and bounds decision where we just send it to the neighbor itself. If we have a partition that changes a subdivision or a lot that's created by parcel, that's different than boundary line adjustment. So doesn't create any lots, so we're not creating lots. That only goes to the applicant and it's type 1. So if it's a subtlety, if your lot was created by a partition or a subdivision and you want to change the lines, that's not a boundary line adjustment. Technically, that's a replat or a partition, which is a land use decision that we're required to notice for. Even if it's to make 2 lots, 1 lot. So if your lot was created prior to 1980 by a legal description, changing the ownership lines, it's a boundary line adjustment, doesn't create any loss, so it's slightly. It's actually more a more rare circumstance because the vast majority of Hood River is subdivided platted lots. Turn of the century, Hood River proper subdivision, Adams Paradise, Wyden subdivision, all Hood River proper, Hood River addition, all these created lots by subdivision. Those changes are not boundary line adjustments.
So the current code saying that we don't have type 1, we only have permitted uses. The idea is that we would now add type 1 review and define which items would be type 1. And these things that before, like, so boundary line adjustments would be something that now are type 1.
Correct.
No neighbors wouldn't get notices. Same thing with hosted home shares and vacation, so STR permits or licenses would not go to neighbors.
Those aren't even in the development code, so I wouldn't even call them type 1. They're not land use decisions, they're just basically permits. We would remove that from any mention of a land use decision. They're not a type 1.
So if I'm understanding right, Matt was asking for our feedback on whether these things should be included as, and they are already on the list. So I guess my feedback is, I think people would like to know if the neighbors are doing a boundary line adjustment or hosted home share stuff. I think those should not be type 1. If, that's my feedback.
Thank you.
I see Councilor Paulson has his hand up as well.
Thank you.
Online.
Grant?
Yeah, piggybacking off of what Councilor Cavalier was saying, somewhat curious as to how this overlays with current zoning code with regard to what is allowed already in certain zones versus what is not. Trying to reconcile those two things against each other versus this permitting process. So we have a number of zones where things are allowed or not allowed, and a lot of these things, these actions would be allowed in certain areas, but have wildly different processes given the same area. I would imagine that if something is allowed in a residential area, like it's just straight outright allowed, that would be, for example, something that could just be a type 1 action. Any council could just say, we have allowed this in this zone. Go forth. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I'm just curious about how that interplay might work out, if that makes any relevant sense in this context, or if I'm not making sense.
I'll take a shot at that, and Dustin, I expect we'll have something to add. But most things that are permitted outright, as you say, and that are subject to clear and objective standards are not subject to discretionary standards or processes. Those would be either a type 1 or sometimes a type 2 process. Things that are conditional uses and or subject to discretionary standards, those would typically be a type 3 process. So yes, that does make sense in terms of things that are allowed outright, excuse me, and they're pretty straightforward in terms of the standards that apply to them. They're generally going to be type 1. Or if you want to make them type 2 because you want to see, again, a heightened level of public notice to the neighbors, and more robust findings associated with them, then they could be type 2. How's that, Dustin?
Yeah, there's some nuance to that. Some of these requests are, it doesn't matter what zone you're in, so use is permitted, may be changed, however, an annexation. Is a process that comes to you, whether it's for type 1, type 2, or type 3. Code interpretation that I'm required to make in writing, doesn't matter what zone it is. Right now, it's a type 2. Or if I wanted to elevate it, I'm given the authority to say I want planning commission to make this. Seek conditional use approval, goes to planning commission every time, regardless of the zone. And I'm reading from page 10 in your second packet. Variance, always to planning commission, partition replat. Unless it's something unusual, regardless of the zone, it's always type 2. Property line adjustment type 1, site plan is either my decision because it exercises discretion, or if it's big, basically something important, I have the discretion to send it to planning commission. These are all really zone agnostic processes. They're not talking about this Councilor Colson, the uses that are included in there. So subdivide land doesn't matter, if you change zone doesn't matter. These are the processes fit. So as we get further along, Matt, is it in 3 or 4 that we're going to talk about the use table? And in those uses, what fits into R3, what fits into R1, R2?
Yeah, that'll be in the next module 3, batch 3.
So when you start talking about what uses fit into what zone, what bucket goes into R1, what bucket goes to R2, how much do we start talking about those uses? That'll be next.
I don't want you all to think I'm not engaged, but I've heard over the 20 years I've been doing city council, like arguments on both sides of 11 types of these, like, yep, I can look at a lot of these from a lot of sides. So it seems like I have nothing to add at this time. Doug.
Dustin, can you talk just a little bit about, I guess, in a general sense, between type 1 and type 2, the sort of implications for staff and time and impacts of moving things between 1 and 2 now that we're bucketing?
Yeah, without explaining all the nuance, the difference is really between weeks and months. In terms of process, application, we'll use an application fee as a barometer. Conditional use approvals, $4,000 application fee, that's 120. It's 120 days max. Typically, we will review that through a land use attorney, submitted an applicant supported by legal counsel or a professional group, traffic application. And this, again, the staff is then writing a long format report. We'll send out notices of application. 50 people approximately, both notice of application and notice of decision.
So that's the order of magnitude of a type 2 decision. It may not have a hearing. It's still pretty forward by way of public exposure. The public is notified, we're bound by law to do so, we're bound by law to allow comments. A type 1 application is usually a technical document, construction drawing, or some sort of something almost in the final development form that comes to us. We review it against the code. It's really more of like the checklist or checking boxes, and it's a yes or no. With maybe a page of written comments to help provide applicant guidance, which they sign and they're on their way. So in order of magnitude, it's the difference between something that is very routine and something that is customized and out there in the public setting.
So I guess the real question is, you know, if we are talking about this, because it sounds like maybe some of the concern about, you know, something that's type 1 versus type 2 is more about public notice and things like that. You know, we'll take the, you know, bed and breakfast or the, you know, something like that happens, or a STR application. I mean, these are code. This is code that you can easily say yes, 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 yes. No, it doesn't mean it. If everything is yes. I guess what is the public participation sort of notice going to do if it's something that's clear cut?
Well, some of it you can't say no to.
That's my point.
It's purely that notification, and I think some of these items have been changed by state law saying. We're going to provide you comment, but you have no recourse.
Right.
So I think we've seen some frustration there of people who are notified. You have comment, but you don't have a right to do anything. So that's how the rules were written for us, and that's how we apply. To have a type 1 application, it has to be clear and objective. I cannot exercise discretion of there should be very limited gray area, and that's really the requirement. It's a clear yes, it's a clear no. That's the only way we can put things into the type 1 bucket. You can't have a compatibility, you can't have a general character, you can't have maybe if statements. It's yes or no, it's balls and strikes, and that's the only way to put it in type 1. So in some ways, the rules have to fit, and those rules have actually it's changed over time. And part of our code issues is we have certain things that the code says you can do this in a type 1 process or a similar permitted process, but it has rules that are discretionary. So that's where we run into problems and they end up having to be shifted around. Is I can't do this administratively. The rules that are written will not allow that. So as we go along in the code, we'll have to adjust some of these things either to say, you know, if you want to provide notice, it's going to be in type 2. If you want to have discretionary rules that say we want to determine whether we're interested in this or whether we just want clear and objective, we'll have options to say it's going to be clear and objective. All your housing has to be clear and objective. You have no choice. Now, if it's clear and objective, do you want to open it up for participation? If it's do you want to move it into the no notice bucket?
Yeah, to your point, the part, go ahead, Dan.
Hold
on, we need a. Listening to this, I want to just make clear that, you know, the distinction between the type 1 and type 2. Type 2 doesn't just trigger notice, it triggers the whole panoply of public participation rights. They get notice and opportunity to comment. They get notice of the decision. They can appeal that decision to the planning commission for an initial hearing. They can appeal the planning commission's decision to the city council for more hearings. Then they can appeal the city council's decision to LUBA. That whole process begins with type 2. Type 1, none of that. So, you know, the balance here is expediting the decision-making process using clear and objective standards or public participation. Sometimes it's a lot of participation.
So the way I see that is, if we get council are hoping to get stuff done, 2 is much more uncertain and long. If we're looking to preserve our town and have less change occur, 2 is going to accomplish that. So it kind of depends on which day of the week.
Yeah, and agree to that. And also in those cases, it sounds like everything that's been put into the type 1 bucket, it's not much you could do. Public participation if you moved it to 2 anyway.
Yeah, that's some of the shifts. I mean,
Okay.
the state is telling you certain things are now type 1, and we will adjust those, of course, so.
Yeah, though I think I may respectfully spin what you said of type 1 is an opportunity to be more efficient and get things through. Type 2 engages the public a little bit more and could delay things. And I do appreciate that it kind of depends on the perspective of things because as a city, we're also we want our constituents to be informed and understand what's going around them, and give them an opportunity just to know. But we also want to give our constituents an opportunity to move things along with their own properties if they want to. So there is kind of a delicate balance here, and it's tricky because if we have a constituent that's making a type 1 application for the sake of efficiency, they would probably very much appreciate being able to just rubber stamp something. But if you have a constituent that's living next door to somebody who's doing something and they don't know about it and it impacts their property, that constituent might want the opportunity to hear things. So I think we kind of have a challenging role in protecting everybody and everybody's interests. And that's just where I'm kind of thinking of it from is, not only do we want to make things more efficient for the people who the property owners that are trying to make these changes pursuant to the code, and we want the type 1 because it's efficient, but we also don't want it to be done so quickly and under the radar that that neighbors don't understand what's happening, and they should have a right to be able to participate. So that's what I'm trying to balance. I would love input on that.
Good. So real life example, when I owned a house, Columbia before, there was a house that was built behind me, took away my view. That's terrible. It was within the standards though. So what can I do other than complain for the sake of complaining at that point? I guess is the question. Like, I think we're all talking about 2 things though, notice for certain things, but along with type 2 goes participation. So I can see people really throwing a lot of wrenches in just for the sake of it because they're upset about change that's completely legal. So how do you I mean, it's one thing to say that they can't be informed, but to me, it sounds like type 2 means that you have to be informed and be able to participate, right? So if it was only to be informed, like, hey, this is going to happen by your house, I can see that being a positive thing. This is happening, it's legal, etc. But the ability to then participate for something that has no ability to be able to change the impacts just seems like a waste of time at that point, right? So is there a way to move notice into, like, can we say that for something that's like a question like that, can we at least notify somebody, or do they have to participate and be a complete type 2, which is a whole different process than type 1? Like, if there is a type 1 review procedure, can it include notice, for example?
So 2 kinds of notice. Notice of the application, notice of the decision. Which do you mean?
Either, based on, what Hannah's saying is just inform it, at least, as people want to know.
Before the decision is made.
Yeah, I mean, well, I guess
Like,
either or, right?
Still have a chance to jam a stick in the spokes.
But, information and the ability to participate, I think, are 2 different things here. You get a letter saying there's been an application, this explaining this is, type 1 or whatever legalese needs to be there, that this is purely informational, why can that not be something that's allowed?
So you're suggesting providing more notice than state law requires. What's driving this is state law.
Yeah, no, and I'm not suggesting either. I'm just saying, trying to understand. Part of her discussion is informing constituents, right? So, I suppose you could put the onus on somebody else, like if, you know, if they see that there's something being developed, they could call, right? You know, for example, and talk to somebody at the city saying, hey, what's going on in front of my house? You could tell them.
Oh, sure, yeah, but I think, you know, you have arrived at the tension here.
Yeah.
The tension of efficiency versus some level of democracy and process. And there's, that's why you get to decide, because there is no perfect match.
And I hear Anna saying, I think exactly the right thing. It's tension between my ability to do what I want and my ability to protect it, to be protected from what my neighbor wants. Depends on the day of the week. Amanda.
I'm kind of having my trouble wrapping my head around this, but like, if there is no argument, it's a yes or no question, why is it even being considered for type 2? Like, if it's straightforward.
It often is, well, one, that's been the way it's been. We have years, some of it is that opportunity to be aware, to be made aware and to ask, have we done it the right way? Did we approve it procedurally? Does a staff finding that says this building is 28 feet tall meet their version of what is 28 feet tall? So we could get to, we say, we find that this thing is 100% right, it meets all the rules and regulations. Not everyone always agrees with that.
Okay, so it's like a double check on like staff work or.
Yeah, I mean, we produce findings of fact or applicant requests. The applicant says, we meet all the boxes, staff says we meet all the boxes. Neighbors around to say, hold up, we don't think this box has been checked appropriately. Even with clear and objective standards that you're required to do, you have heard cases before you where the neighbors did not believe that the clear and objective standards were clearly and objectively best.
I think that's where we're, and forgive me, because now we're getting into the weeds, but I like this stuff. But this is where the issue is I think you provide notice to the neighbors. They have an opportunity to know what's happening, and the criteria by which they can throw the stick into the spokes is that they might not like what's happening. But as long as the city has done its job in following the rules, then they get to be notified that this is what's happening on their neighbor's property. That this is how the city has gone through the steps to approve it and why it qualifies for approval. And then, you know, they have an opportunity to come in and say, well, I don't like it because it's blocking my view, which is disappointing to me, but it still meets the code. That it's unfortunate, but that's where, you know, the spokes don't get stopped because, you know, it's not a reason for actually blocking what the decision is. If there's a mistake or justifiable reason to say the city failed to meet its job of checking the boxes because they missed some detail, then there might be a reason why the neighbor could protest the decision. Efficient and being able to allow people to do the things that they want to do on their own property.
So can you think of an recent example where you were going through something that would be considered type 1 in the past, where something clear and objective was found by a neighbor and they came to us, gave input, and you found that you'd made a mistake based on that feedback?
Well, type 1, we don't provide notice. So type 2, we would.
Yeah, but something that, you know, that we, like, you're asking kind of here, like, you know, something that should require type 2, right? And I think Anna said a couple things in here that are type 1, should they be type 2? So is that one of the questions here? That could be completely against state law.
So it comes up periodically. It's not common where it goes, and it'd have to get up to the appellate courts for it to really be known. I had a case a few years ago in Portland. The this guy wanted to build a really tall house. It was in a neighborhood that had slopes and couldn't get the variance, tried different ways of changing the design to get a variance for the house height. Then he figured, I'm just going to have the drawing show that I meet it in order to measure house height. I'm going to mound up the dirt around it. So you measure from there up to here. And what do you know? I now meet it. I'm just going through a building permit process. That's what he did. And so we appealed the building permit based on the city's interpretation of how to measure house height under the building code and how they exercise this kind of discretion in determining the base point. And there was no appeal opportunity. The city said, no appeal here, get out of here. We're not going to accept it. We appealed to LUBA and LUBA said, it's a building permit, get out of here. Court of Appeals said it involved discretion in terms of how you determine that native grade. So that was situations where the local government tried to orchestrate it or didn't think it was involved discretion, and Court of Appeals disagreed. So you didn't have to take that house behind yours if you had only gotten the right lawyer. Nothing like saving your view comes free.
I'm mindful of the scope of this agenda item.
Yeah, I'm going to try to summarize a little bit what I've heard, which is really just that this is a challenge to determine that balance between efficiency and giving people an opportunity to participate. I think there are things that are clearly going to be either because they're required by state law to be or because they're very straightforward type 1 processes. I think what we might want to do is come back to you when we are further along in this code process and bring you a shorter list of things that could be type 1 or type 2 and dig into this in a little more detail. I'm not sure that we're going to be able to get down to those specifics tonight, but I think what I've heard is that it is important at some point to inform your neighbors of what's going on with your property or with the property next to them, and give them an opportunity to participate. But at the same time, we don't want to do that for every single thing and create a really excessive burden on staff and frankly on yourselves in terms of anything being able to come back. Because as Dan said, it's not just giving people notice, it's giving them the opportunity to appeal something. So that's my summary of what I've heard so far. Does that make sense? Are there any other kind of opinions? I didn't cover everything everybody said, but that's my sort of summary of the discussion so far.
Doug and then Anna.
And I think worth noting, Dan said it, what is state law and what's required by state law, and do we want to go further than state law? It's more process than state law requires in these types of instances.
Anna.
I might just ask if there's an opportunity when we get to the public process or of the code revision, is there a way, Matt or Dustin, that we can actually ask our constituents to weigh in on that of like, what do they want us to prioritize? Do they want us to prioritize efficiency, or do they want us to prioritize their ability to participate?
Yeah, I think that's some of our interested parties. Interviews, we're going to hear, I can guarantee what I'm gonna hear from the development community.
Developers want to develop.
Probably your housing providers, they're gonna have the same opinion. Like CAC, GED, they have been frustrated by the opportunity for people to participate. However, your neighborhood groups and some of those interested parties will be more increasingly concerned about maintaining the integrity of their neighborhood and being empowered to participate along each step of the way. So we will share what we hear, of course, with you, but we're going to have some of those groups that direct outreach and bring that information back. But I think we have what we need here. I think clearly it's not all one way or another. And again, you got about 16 months to knit this all together. So I think we could move on to our next item.
Oh, thank
Unless
you.
you have.
Oh, thank goodness.
All right, I will jump to the next one. I've got a couple of questions on this slide. These are at least a little bit more straightforward. They're actually, in some ways, they get it specific, the specifics of that last question a little bit. So the first one, kind of the context is that you currently require notice of decisions within 250 feet of the subject property. In a lot of cases, not for everything, but in a lot of cases, the state only requires that you provide notice to properties within 100 feet. And the question is, do you want to retain that expanded notice area for those things where the state would say you only need to notify people within 100 feet? So that's question 2, and see what you think about that. And then we can ask the next one.
Doug. Sorry. Yeah, I guess the first question I would ask, and I guess this can be really applied to a lot of other things. What kind of issues, this is a question for Dan, what kind of issues do we run into when we make our development code more stringent than state statute? Since I know kind of one of the goals of this process is to bring things into alignment with the model code. My general take on this is that, I think we want to be in alignment, since that's kind of what we're starting to do. On the other hand, since we already have this, the 250 feet as opposed to 100 feet, I think it also would be, I don't know, kind of a little bit of poor form on the city's part to reduce the level of noticing for neighbors, reduce the radius. So I guess, yeah, I don't know if you can address that first or third.
That's a political question. State law requires in most of these cases 100 feet, and you're providing more. I always recommend comply with state law. So do you want to provide more? That's a political question. What comes with that is more people, more notice, more people who have opinions, sometimes stronger opinions, and they want to appeal something, and that's how that happens. If you have, like Portland does have a very well-established neighborhood association set up in the city, so they also get notice. And so if the question is word spread about an application, that's how there are other mechanisms in other jurisdictions. Posting the property is another way that word gets out. But this is mailed notice within 250 feet of the outer perimeter is how it's supposed to be measured. So that's kind of a political question if you want to go beyond what state law requires.
And operationally, this means very little to us. We use GIS, we print notices, it doesn't create a different workflow for us, 100 feet versus 250. So we have to do it, we gotta run the same process, but it'll cost you more in postage. I think that's about it.
No, I just, my thought process on this was that, it would look like, oh, it's like we're reducing, that from 250 feet to 100 feet, like we want fewer people to be noticed about things. That's all I'm saying. It's like, I can see how the public could view this as like, oh, we're trying to reduce transparency.
I think that's what the state wants. They want it to be like, let's get some stuff built.
Which I'm all for that, but
yeah. I think it was Doug.
I still have, yeah. So, forgive me for sounding a little political, but I agree with Paul's statement, as well, but, I think if you open it up to 250 or whatever, and it'd be nice to understand why it was decided to be 250 in the first place. Probably don't have that context for this kind of stuff. Yeah, I mean, you're probably like, we're not hearing a bunch of please develop around me kind of stuff in the community all the time. I think if we have 250, there's a lot more people that are coming to us saying, we don't want you to develop in our neighborhood, et cetera. We like the way that it is. However, this type of development is already allowed here, right? So again, just trying to reduce the noise, and to Paul's point, the state says, let's get stuff built. And I think this is one of, death by a thousand cuts, this may not be a huge thing for you, but it sort of plays into like. We cave on this, we cave on that, we cave on this, we cave on that, we've all of a sudden gotten nowhere. Right, so it is a small decision and not a huge financial impact, et cetera. Does it fall into? We fall down on this, we fall down on that, it's all of a sudden we've gotten really nowhere. I don't know the answer to that because it's the second question, we're sort of getting to, but. I'd like to keep that in mind, the aggregate.
Yeah, I guess I was kind of curious, like, why did we make it 250, but I guess,
There's really three criteria in the state. 100 feet is for incorporated places, cities. 250 you get into county jurisdiction, and then 500 is for EFU. So the most restrictive that the state requires is 500 feet, and that is for your farm and forest lands. That requires minimum notice. 250 is unincorporated places, 100 is the city. We've chosen to notice beyond that. As far back as we go.
Historically, Hood River has always provided more robust public participation rights and opportunities than state law required. And just in many different ways, it's much more involved community. In some it's a spectator sport. In Hood River, they're actually involved. And the pendulum is on the state level swinging now away from that towards expediting more density, which is not super popular for established neighborhoods. So it's a pendulum thing over the course of decades, and Hood River's always had robust public participation, and now state law is trying to move that pendulum in most communities in order to achieve those state level policy objectives of more density, more housing.
I guess, like, I like the idea of just being consistent with the state law, so it's less confusing, but. And it's not like we're restricting people's participation by bringing notice down, we're just telling us, they're like explicitly telling us people, I guess. And then like, okay, so just for like a visual representation for my brain, like 100 feet would be like, if you have a neighborhood, whatever standard lot size. Of like, how many houses is 100 feet and how many houses is 200?
Let's do some real basic lot. Basic lot within the city, call it between Columbia, Cascade, Lincoln, from Front Street to 20th. Each of those lots is 50 feet wide. So 100-foot notice from the edge of a property would be 2 lots in any single direction. 250 feet will be 5 lots in any single direction.
Think
of it as like the folks on either side of you plus one versus the whole block plus the next block over. It's kind of what you end up with.
Yeah, I'll make this quick. It's related to others as well. I think if state law is encouraging density, I think that's what our housing goals dictate, and these sorts of things there's a reason that it's because of density and whatnot. I think I want to give blanket sort of look towards that, and I appreciate that context as we go through this. Is this for pro density? Not just pro development, but pro density.
And I would say it's not just density, and Dan said this too, but it's housing, it's production of housing. Increasing the supply of housing is a pretty significant state goal right now. So all of these things, I won't say they create more work for somebody to get housing built of a lot of different types. So.
And it's also cost of housing, smaller lots, land values, the big cost, smaller lots, cheaper, I'm doing air quotes here, cheaper housing.
And
all things being equal.
And on item 3, which is about, do we want to post signage? The logic, I would assert, we want it easier to build, less signage, right? That would follow logically.
Yeah, and again, this is current practice. You do not require posting of the sign in any of your projects, be it type 1, type 2, type 3.
that it's not required by state law, you haven't done it, other people do it. Just a opinion for you to, but opine on
And
you want to consider it.
yeah, I'm gonna sum up number two. I think I heard more people than not say they would be concerned about reducing that 250 notice down to 100 feet. That they understand, that that's a way to be more efficient, but at the same time, that it would be problematic to necessarily bring that notice distance down. I don't know if I heard anybody say that.
I'm not sure I agree with that. I heard voices
Yeah.
on both sides of that. I
Okay.
didn't noses.
You can put me down for 100. I was playing a devil's advocate on that. and bring it up for discussion.
I'm not sure I heard not 100, but
Okay.
Amanda, 100?
Yeah.
Yes, you were right, Matt. 100, we heard 100, was the preponderance.
That aligns us with Steve.
Yeah.
Just what we're trying to do.
And what about on signage? Can we give them some helpful?
Yeah, so, and I just want to point out on this signage question, we're not talking about every development application. We're specifically kind of zeroing in on type 3 applications where there will be a public hearing, and whether or not you want to require the applicant to post a sign on the property in those cases that says, we are planning to develop this, or we have an application and there will be a public hearing on this date related to this proposal. That's the question there. And again, as Dustin said, it's not something you do now, and it's not something that's required, but it's something you could do, and it's something that a lot of other cities do.
Great.
My opinion on number 3 is no. We do not need to require signage on type 3.
Thank you. We got one chime for no sign, no sign. No sign. We got a preponderance of no sign.
Okay.
Or we can talk about it more, but we have a preponderance of no sign.
I'm okay with no sign, but I think I'd rather keep the 250 feet. I don't know, I'm thinking about that. I'm undecided on number 2, but I'm fine with no sign on.
We're gonna take a 5-minute break.
All right. No.
You're taking a 5-minute break. Taking a 5-minute break. I would check and make sure. If that's a text me or something, tells me to do something different. Yeah, for a while longer. See. Yeah, we just finished question 3 of 9. Well, I knew the first one would take a really long time. Cause it was like, it was basically a philosophical question. But one was potentially a lot of detail to it. Well, there's a lot of philosophical discussion. Thanks, Ben.
Number 4.
All right. So number 4, this is kind of one, I think this is the last one that has to do specifically with kind of issues related to public notice or participation to a degree. So the question here has to do with neighborhood meetings. Right now, the city requires developers to hold neighborhood meetings for some fairly specific things, subdivisions, planned unit developments, and certain other development applications as determined by the planning director. And the question here is, do you want to expand the requirements for applicants to host a neighborhood meeting? We identified a couple of options in the code update document. One would be that it be required for site plan review applications over a certain size. Another could be that you require it really for any application that requires a public hearing. So if there's going to be a public hearing, that there also needs to be a neighborhood meeting as well. So
Are we more or less inclusive than the state?
that is a good question.
The state law. Does state require neighborhood meeting anywhere?
Yeah, I don't think there's an.
It's a local creature.
Yeah, and I
No
see,
obligation for the state. We are more inclusive than the state. Correct. Thank you.
yes. I mean, more inclusive than what the state requires for sure. And I see a lot of variation in this in other jurisdictions I work in across the state. Like Dan said, it's a local creature and it really varies quite a bit.
Thank you. Anybody want to chime in on this? Doug?
Yeah, I just try to think of who's gonna show up to a neighborhood meeting about a single family home or something like that, like.
Well, if it's triplex, but yeah, right, single family.
But I mean, anything that's within code. You know, like, is this something that's yeah, because if we're going to the planning commission and all that sort of stuff, people have a right to participate. If there's, an exception that's being asked, so I want to build it 40 feet instead of 35 feet. Like, I get that, but like, you're allowed to build XYZ here. You're allowed to build missing middle or whatever it is. Someone might not like that that's allowed. What's the neighborhood meeting really doing? Except is it giving people an ability to decompress or understand it more effectively? Why would there be a neighborhood meeting? It's like, oh, I love that you're doing what you're allowed to do.
I think good questions. I think when we posed this question and identified some options, the options we identified really would be for larger projects. They wouldn't be for application procedures that do require some discretion or will end up where the applicant will end up needing to go through a public hearing process. So it's cases where what somebody says actually could have an impact, the developer could change what they're doing because they have to go through those types of processes. So I think, from my perspective, probably we wouldn't be requiring neighborhood meetings for things that are just type 1 decisions, probably not even most type 2s, but type 3 maybe, and where other cities do require this, it tends to be for those sort of more discretionary applications or larger projects. Somewhat similar to what you do now, but you could do it.
These are going through the planning commission review process anyway. People have a right to participate in that process. This seems like almost an extra step, like you're having, who's gonna show up at that I've been to a lot of, public meetings, with planning commission, tends to be the neighborhood that shows up, so is that to inform them prior to getting to planning, what's the purpose?
Yeah, that would be advance notice. It's another step that we require for larger projects, so. So questions directly with the developer.
Okay.
Or applicant in probably a more candid space than the planning commission, where they stand up and they may be given 3 to 10 minutes to say their piece regarding just the code. The neighborhood meeting often provides the opportunity of outside of code, what are you doing? I want to be heard. Will you incorporate any of these changes? It's a out of the legislative process or quasi-judicial process. It's a way for people to connect.
So, yeah, so I can see that being positive or negative. I mean, is a developer gonna go to a community that doesn't do this because they don't get yelled at? So that's one question, that's sort of subjective. The other question, I guess, is, does this in any way slow down a planning commission process?
Yeah, in terms of staff operation, it's not much. We're not providing any findings. I think this is pretty light. It does hinge completely on the developer to produce. So we put it in their hands, whether it diffuses neighborhood issues, which is the ideal, you would want to engage in diffusing neighborhood issues, or whether it incites greater animation. I mean, that depends on the case, and it depends on people.
We already are doing this.
Right.
We do this.
Amanda.
Yeah, I guess my question was, there was a meeting about the possible hotel or whatever, was that required by them or by us for them to do that? Is that what we're talking about?
So that was one where it's not required by statute, but I'm given discretion to say an application of greater magnitude that may have an impact on those because of its size, because of its characteristics, whatever. I am granted the authority to say, you're gonna do this. And in that instance, I simply use my discretion, say, all right, applicant, here's notice the pool, before your application is complete, you will have a neighborhood.
Yeah, because I think that's really helpful and important for that stuff kind of thing.
So that's not a requirement by number, it's just that as you have it now, my discretion.
And even if we don't expand the requirements, you still have the discretion at any time
Yeah,
to.
if that's the way, you would like to keep it.
Okay.
I guess that kind of leads into my question. My question was, do you staff find this a helpful thing? Because since you have discretion to, require this and you do that, that kind of implies to me that sometimes staff does find this helpful to have these neighborhood meetings, because a lot of times some of these big projects come up. There's lots of rumors that, start flying around about different things and, having these neighborhood meetings, I could see really kind of head off a lot of these questions at, before it gets to your desk / in front of planning commission or city council. So I guess I would, like to know if staff finds these helpful.
Yeah, I think generally, it helps address the rumor mill oftentimes, because it's pre-application. There's kind of this holding pattern between people actually getting their applications in order before you have a hearing. I like the opportunity to have the neighbors and the developers have a candid conversation. Whether they are at odds or not, it provides that venue. And
Kevin,
that's important.
did you have something to add?
Yeah, a couple of things. Agreed, that great opportunity for the developer and the neighbors to talk to each other before they get to the public hearing. Opportunity for the developer to make some changes to the proposal before they get to the public hearing, address some of the neighbors' concerns. The point on the timeline, the development timeline, right now the code says that this meeting needs to be completed before the application is deemed complete. Doesn't really slow down the process.
Thank you. Anna?
I just wonder, again, for this whole process that we're going through is to make things very clear and objective. And so, while this number 4 question says that makes a lot of sense to have it for larger projects like planned unit developments. But it said, that you do have discretion currently, the planning director has discretion to decide. Would it be better if we actually put some parameters here and just said, instead of leaving it to your discretion, saying these are the kinds of projects that require neighborhood meetings? Does that make life better?
And you have that now with it in those that are planned unit developments and subdivisions. So you've stated, okay, here, the code states, here's the two that, are gonna go outside of my discretion. And then it's for discretion. So if you want to expand the list. Anything that goes to a public hearing, regardless, that could be a way to move that along and expand it.
So the example that like Amanda gave, would that be something that would expand the list, would that have been included in something that's going to a public hearing? So.
Yeah, because I have the discretion to determine whether it goes to a public hearing or not. So yes, it would, because I have the discretion to say this is gonna go to a hearing.
But the larger idea of this is to take things out of discretion, right, and put it into code so that it makes anybody that picks up the code, it's clear and objective of this is the step in order to get this approval or get this done, these are the requirements. So, I mean, is that something that we should be thinking about is that what this project is a lot about, is taking things out of discretion and making.
I don't know if it's taking it out of discretion, it's making it more useful. So, if you took everything out of discretion, you're gonna have up and down. And you're gonna have no grader. So there's a risk there of, yeah, it makes it a lot easier, and if you just miss, the answer is no. And you have a lot of disappointed customers who miss by 1 foot or 1 inch. So I wouldn't say it's just taking it out of discretion, but it's probably fitting that discretion where it's useful to the community and makes the process better. Sometimes discretion makes the process better. So I wouldn't want to be so hard on that. Now, there's a fine line between discretion and ambiguity. And so with this, I think it's kind of, although I have discretion to do this, I don't think it necessarily sets somebody on the trajectory of success or fail on its own merits, or does it make the process that much more difficult or worse? So I'm pretty comfortable with it
as that. So.
Next.
Let's see, there's a hand up from.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Grant.
Just a conceptual question on the neighborhood meetings, would it? If we were interested in making it less discretionary as to when they happen, so developers or anybody engaging in this process knows what to expect going in. Are there pros and cons to saying, for example, every type 3 or type 4 sort of process, we're going to expect a neighborhood meeting?
That could be useful. They're about, it would be stating probably what is operational now. You have a hearing, we're probably gonna make you go for a type, it's probably a large enough project that we're gonna ask for that to happen.
Sure, so generally, right now, a type 3 or a type 4, they could expect that now. Right?
That's correct.
So codifying that through this process would be helpful.
Yeah, I'm really indifferent honestly on this one. I mean, it's really, I'm gonna do it anyway, if I have discretion to do so. Whether you wanna put it in, it would make it clear to everyone who comes through a type 3 process, so.
Right. Okay.
Well, and I appreciate that you would do it. I think it might be beneficial to put it in the code because you aren't gonna work here forever. There will be a new testing at some point, right? So, I don't know, just setting that expectation for future.
It does help standardize the process.
Great.
All right, thank you all. Okay, I will go to the next one. This is another one that number 5 and 6 to some degree, but 5 is also about discretion and about kind of adding some additional, I guess, maybe structure to the code. This is related to change of use review. So right now, changes in commercial uses, including new tenants in existing buildings, can trigger a land use application requirement, and you say that in your code. You say change of use means any use that substantially differs from the previous use of a building, structure, or land. There's some factors that are listed in terms of, how to think about that change in use. And the current code gives the planning director discretion to determine if a development proposal is a change of use subject to land use review. So it sort of says, here's the things to think about in determining if this represents a change of use as defined in your code. But the planning director has discretion to make that determination. And the question here is, do you want to add some thresholds into your code that relate to, when something is a change of use? And we listed a few different things. Could be, transitioning from one type of commercial use to another. We listed some examples of that. It could be a certain level of intensity in terms of the difference in projected traffic, for instance, if it's going to generate more than a certain number of trips. Could be compliance with parking standards or other things. So the question is, do you want to add some more specificity around this issue and some more specific thresholds and standards in your code related to change of use?
How many more of these questions are we going to have tonight?
I think we have 10 total.
Thank you.
9. There's a total of 9 questions.
I don't have an opinion about this one. I don't have expertise to judge which of these would be important to fall on which side of the rubric. Doug.
Sounds similar to the last one, right, Justin? You have discretion here today. Should we formalize it? And that being said, sounds like you usually, if there's a significant change to something and whatever, there's maybe a reason you'd want to do it, right? So is this similar to the last question?
Similar, this one actually does establish quite a bit of harbor and operate, whereas before the neighborhood meeting, yes or no? It's
Harbor?
Heartburn for the applicants and staff. This is the difference between your project and your tenant space becoming straight to permit,
or going through a hearing, be notified by the neighbor in time. You know, because the change of use, whether it's significant, you know, when your retailer becomes a cafe, you have an SDC trigger, you have a trips trigger, you have parking calculated, and you go through the process. How much of that, and me and both my predecessors have had to grapple with how much changes represent significant. You're a bookstore and you want to become a clothing retailer that is generally retail. That has a pretty limited change. That's not a great notice. Once you start getting into food, beverage, bar, if your office becomes something else, that can have a meaningful impact around hours of operation. So I think the request here would be to try to figure out, do we have an all or nothing scenario to where it's, we should get a building permit, we should look at your traffic, we should look at this, but we may not necessarily have to have a full-blown land use public notice process. So thinking about that, I think it gives some level of opportunities that it's not all or nothing, it's not yes or no. And this is actually meaningful to your small business owners and the people that live near small businesses.
Amanda?
I mean, I can see the benefit of having some more specificity in the code just for like fairness, I guess. So that like all the businesses are treated the same, you know, like, cause if it's up to judgment of like, oh, you are a change of use and you're not, like, I don't know, like, I don't know if that's even like that, but if that's what you're saying.
I do that every day.
Yeah, so it'd be nice, like, as a business person, to be like, well, you let that person change their business, you know, I feel like that can probably cause some unnecessary stress or feelings of being treated differently or something, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just curious how other jurisdictions handle this, and is it, you know, a cause for consternation in other jurisdictions as well?
I think I would say generally the larger your jurisdiction, less touch there is. And also that has the impact with how your building official operates and how your building permits operate. Because a lot of times this will trigger an SDC review, a building department review. It actually has a cascading effect down the development process. And then really the smaller, the more oversight there is on each individual. So whether it really depends on where you put your emphasis and where you start to enforce the rules and codes. A lot of times it gets parked at the planning department because we're here front and center. We're full-time, we're occupied, and this falls in our shop rather than it becoming the discretion of a full-time, you know, fully staffed building department that handles these things, that executes SDCs, that does that heavy lifting. It really falls to us now on these things.
So I guess for clarification purposes, what I'm asking is, for other cities in our, like our size, are there clear delineations of what is discretionary and what isn't, or what the standards are?
It would be all over the place. Everything from none to this. I mean, this is completely subjective in a lot of ways. It does list a couple things, but we could look to see if there's some more standardized changes. Does it trigger this much parking? Does it trigger this many vehicle trips? There will be pieces that are a little more standard. Ours just doesn't have any standard to it at all.
And would those factors be influenced by whether the applicant is in the Heights Business District or Downtown Business District versus more, you know, outside of town, you know, neighborhood kind of place?
It could, but it also could be limited to saying this is general square footage and what the industry thinks of this use at this size. So you could get some nuance as to change it, or you could simply use a category. So it could be either. It could be based on locational influence, or it could just be based on how the industry looks at your building. So we would recommend, and I would recommend that you give me some options rather than say full land use process or nothing. And I think that's gonna help a greater number of your applicants, and we should come up with something that helps set aside what is major and what is not.
I think there should be some thresholds. It asked me at what threshold should, and I have no idea.
Okay. We'll assist with some thresholds.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah.
Can we go on 6?
Sure. Yep. Okay. So 6 is kind of another threshold question. This is one where you have a current valuation threshold that allows for exterior improvements to existing commercial or industrial buildings without triggering a review process. I think when we looked at that, we thought it would probably make sense just to take a look at those thresholds and make sure they seem reasonable, seem like the right thresholds. And the question here is, should we take a look at that, I think, and should there be some threshold where staff can approve changes without, notice through a type 1 process? Did I get that one right, Dustin? I want to make sure I'm articulating that.
In short, there's a monetary threshold that allows projects to move forward without site plan review. It's $75,000. It's based in a long time ago, and at this point, we have basically figured there's very little that can be done for $75,000. So we believe you need to look at that number and see what threshold or what exemption exists there and update it.
That sounds good.
Okay.
Grant.
All right. Councilor.
Sorry, Matt. Grant.
Thanks. Just my feedback on that one is anytime we're talking about.
I'm sorry, Grant. I'm having a hard time hearing you. Could you talk a little more slowly or closer or clearly or something? Thanks.
Sure. Hopefully this is better. My main thing about having set numbers as thresholds is the fact that they are arbitrary in nature, do not change over time unless we legislatively go in and change them, do not change to meet economic conditions, can vary wildly building by building, condition by condition, remodel by remodel, improvement by improvement. So that this, as in terms of just changing the threshold number, I wouldn't be as interested in that being a solution as something that was better formulated than just a number, just a new target number that we were working under. I'm not sure what that is, what the solution to that would be yet.
Yeah, often it can be a percentage, which is at least a little better than a number. Still can feel arbitrary, but yeah.
We can work on various metrics that are outside just the cash expenditure.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. I will move to the next one. So this one, and I'm sorry, just gotta flip my piece of paper real quick. But the question here, I'll read the question and then I'll provide a little context. And I think this one might be one that that Dan wants to weigh in on as well. So currently, you have a plat review allowed as a plat review, final plat review, excuse me, is essentially a type 1 procedure. It's a ministerial action. And the question is, should it be a type 2 action instead? And I think the reason for asking that is that would ensure that there's a notice of approval required, so that there's not some indefinite time frame for a potential appeal. So I think that's the kind of the gist of this one, but I want to make sure Dustin and or Dan weigh in on this one.
This is a kind of a sleeper, tricky question, because if you, in all of these, if you mess up on categorizing the permit, like the building permit I mentioned, and you don't issue notice, then the appeal period to LUBA, for example, never even starts. So you can appeal 10 years after the thing is built because the local government messed up the notice and people entitled to it by state law didn't get it. So this has been litigated in Portland where, and I guess what I'd ask you to think about in evaluating this is, how much change can happen between the preliminary plat decision and final plat. So if there's no change allowed, like same number of lots, streets in the same place, public improvements the same, then there should be no change when it comes to final plat, and type 1 is appropriate. But if there's any kind of change, and this is where Portland tripped up, they allowed a certain amount of change between preliminary and final, and they didn't give notice, and they multiple appeals of the final plat that people had to find out they were made, the decision was made, and kind of claw it back and take it to LUBA. And so now Portland processes all its final plat decisions as type 2s. So, they got tired of, serial litigants appealing final plat decisions. Has that ever happened here? And how much change can happen between the preliminary plat decision and the final plat? If there's a lot of change, that argues more in favor of a type 2.
So not an issue, but just a matter of being mindful of. So.
And all for being proactive and avoiding litigation.
Good.
Good.
Just curious, what does the model code have this as? 1?
Doesn't recognize it.
Doesn't recognize it, okay.
All right, 8.
Okay. 8, kind of maybe a bigger one in terms of a policy issue. So the situation with annexations currently is that annexation review is part of your land use code. It's addressed in Title 17. It requires public hearings before the Planning Commission. They then provide a recommendation to council. A lot of jurisdictions deal with annexation really outside of the development code. It's part of the municipal code, but it's not dealt with as a land use decision as part of the development code. And in part, that's to provide cities with a little more flexibility in terms of what they can require as a condition of annexation. And so this is sort of the question here is, do you want to keep this the way it is as part of your development code with it going to the Planning Commission and then the council, or do you want to do something different? And there's a note here that even if you kind of pull the annexation decision itself out, any associated land division or development applications for areas that are being annexed, those things would still go through a separate land use process. So just wanted to point that out, and also just see if Dustin or Dan have anything to add on this one.
Yeah, you've talked about this before. Currently, your annexation standards are within the zoning code. What we do is we process typically simultaneous reviews. I think, for me, that streamlines the application. It has Planning Commission, and you all review when we have land use decisions, they occur in context. That's useful for us for writing and tailoring decisions on what conditions of approval and future expectations there are. However, it is your choice whether you continue to handle them in the manner that you've handled in the past, or whether you change them. It's been argued, and I don't think we necessarily agree with this argument, that because it's not in the land use code, they end up being immune to the land use process and some of the appeals and some of the jurisdictions. We think that regardless of whether it's in the land use and development code, it ends up going to LUBA anyway, and it becomes land use no matter where you park it. And so really, we think that's by way of proactive. I think that doesn't really change anything. Again, I support it being there. We have to administer it. Your Planning Commission is your recommending body now. I think you found some value in having that group pre-vet those matters before they arrive to you as the first hearing body. Because that is really the alternative. You could be the only body that hears these things prior to Planning Commission staff outside of the land use context. You wanted to take that on, we're welcome to send it right to you. Our recommendation is to use your Planning Commission staff in this process.
Sounds good.
All right. Should I move to go to the next one?
Yep.
And I think, yeah, so there's one item in your document. Oh, I think I might have left one out. Yes, there was a question about adjustments. So Dustin was right. There are 10. This one says 9, but I think there's one. Make sure it's, yeah, sorry about that. I did leave one out, so my apologies, but this is item 9 in the cover sheet. It's about adjustments. So you have a variance process, but you don't have an adjustment process. An adjustment can typically be used to deviate from land use standards. Often, it's sort of deviating from numerical standards. You don't have to show that there's some kind of hardship or something like you might with a variance, but you need to show that you're meeting the intent of the standards or requirements. And so the question here is, do you want to include or not include an adjustment? Well, there's a couple questions, I guess. One is, do you want to include an adjustment process? The other issue here is that one of the recent pieces of legislation includes some mandatory adjustments that you have to essentially allow for. It sunsets in 2032. You could provide for other types of adjustments at your discretion. So question, do you want to include or not include the mandatory adjustments provision within the code, or directly apply the adjustments that are described in the House bill until 2032?
I want to hear from our landmarks review board on this.
This is the one before landmark.
Yeah, there's the landmarks one after this
So
one.
the thing I'm looking at, we're not talking about.
Yeah, my apologies. I'm going to pause sharing so we're not looking at this. Sorry about that.
Currently, the state.
Yeah, I left this one out of the PowerPoint.
The state will require you to do adjustments to standard setback, reduce building height.
Not adjustments to buildings, as this one says, adjustments to our code.
To your code.
Okay, thank you.
Your regs will have to be adjusted. It's Senate Bill 1537 will require that until 2033. The question is, do you want to include those provisions in your code or simply direct apply them from the state's mandate? You will have to do it, whether it's in your code, it's a part of the process, or whether you just apply it from the state with no rules in the code. It's up to you.
Yeah.
Can you give us an example of what you mean by adjustments and if, when was the last time we changed our code? I mean, if it's something that 2032 is 7 years away, please.
7.
7, thank you. So, I mean, if we did add it now and it's gonna go away in 6.5 years, 7 years, does it make sense to include it? But first, let's talk about what are we talking about with adjustments?
Say development wants to come apply, if they could add one more unit to their house if we allow them to have a 4.5 foot setback from the side, whereas 5 is the minimum. We have to say yes to that. There's as long as they can demonstrate that it's either cheaper or that it adds more units, you will, for the next 7 years, you'll have a requirement to say yes. And that is coming straight from the state. And so how do we administer that? How do we notice it? How do we not notice it? Who gets to decide? Those things, by having them in the code, help advertise that. The state has not necessarily vetted all those rules and regulations. I think our ask is, where would you like to? Would you like them to be in the code to administer? Do you want that flexibility? Do you want it to we could have a sunset in the code saying this provision sunsets in 2033. It's really up to you on how we park that. I would recommend it's in the code rather than trying to draw it out of the ORS. I like having a complete package. I would also recommend that it's sunset at the time.
See now, Nick.
Sure.
And I do see.
Oh, sorry, Grant. Sorry, Grant.
Thanks.
Thanks. the way I was reading it is these adjustments are mandatory. We have to do it. I would agree that we would need to do it. And I agree with staff that we keep it until 2032 or the start of 2033, whenever they sunset that, we follow what is prescribed with them sunsetting. Readdressed at that time.
Great, thank you.
Right. Thank you. Okay, back to the next, and I think this is the last question. Again, apologies for leaving that last one out of the presentation. So this one is related to historic landmarks within historic districts. So right now you've got really limited exemptions to what somebody can do in those situations. And so one of the things that staff frequently encounters is somebody wants to make a minor alteration to a building within the historic district. And that applicant or that person needs to go through sort of the full review process. So the question is should the current pretty short list of minor or exemptions be expanded to include some additional minor alterations that still preserve the historic landmark, but offer opportunities for folks to maintain a building, improve a building, but still kind of meet the intent of the district. So did I get that right, Dustin?
Yeah, that's the right question now.
Okay, yeah, sorry about that.
So we do have this special committee that like knows about this and thinks about this a lot. And I want to hear from them. That's me. Other?
Fortunately, just to address that, last week we did have a landmarks review board.
Beautiful.
We've been having many of them. They have already allowed me to employ this. With some, I do some written advertisements to them because at this point in your downtown district, there's no differentiation between a building listed on your historic inventory and not. So a building that may not be a contributing structure has the same rules. They've been more permissive on those buildings to follow a different path. We think there's some discrepancy there and we think the code should be adjusted. So we've worked with them on this already. They're aware we're coming here. I think they're interested in continuing to participate, but this follows practice already that they've agreed to.
Great, thank you. So is there a question?
You comfortable?
Codifying
practice.
Codifying practice sounds good to me. Yeah.
All right, cool. That was my last one of these questions. So nice work. I know it's been a long evening for y'all. I appreciate you hanging in there. And the last bit is just next steps. So this time we kind of, because of schedules for you all and Planning Commission, we kind of flipped the order of review of Module 2. So we talked to you first. So we'll be reviewing the same information, some of these same questions with Planning Commission at one of their next couple of meetings. And then the other next step is to be then updating modules 1 and 2 based on what we've heard from you, the Planning Commission, and staff. We have been working on a video that's kind of an introductory video to this process. So we're getting close to finishing that up and being ready to distribute that. We'll be chatting with Dustin and Kevin about that tomorrow. And then we'll fairly quickly be diving into work on Code Module 3. As Kevin said at the start of the meeting, we will be, and I think Dustin alluded to it too, we will be organizing and conducting meetings with some of the same types of interested parties that we talked to during the code audit phase of this project. Our thinking is that it makes more sense to do that once we're partly into module 3, because that's where a lot of the standards that we're looking at become just more concrete. We're looking at specific design and development standards at that point. So we expect to be doing that this fall, kind of as we're working on module 3 and starting to think about module 4. We also have kind of a task here to be conducting some like brief questionnaires or surveys. I thought, one of the questions earlier on was, could we ask some of these questions we're asking you just to the community at large? And I think yes, and this would be a mechanism to do that. We're not planning on a really long survey, but just almost like little pop quizzes or pop-up surveys or however you want to describe them, where we ask 1 or 2 or at most 3 questions, just to get people's quick feedback on things. So those are all things that we'll be doing in the coming months. So that is all I have. Dustin, Kevin, anything to add?
I think we bet it up.
Thanks, Matt.
All right, excellent. All right, well, again, thanks for hanging in there. Very much appreciate it, and talk to you later.
Thank you. Thank you, Dustin.
Thank you all for your time. I know there's a lot of work. We do really appreciate you being here and sticking with us.
I think it takes us to city manager comments.
Thank you, Mayor. You heard from someone earlier today, just questions and concerns about Uber and Lyft. I just wanted to let you know that staff had a productive meeting with representatives from Uber. And one of the things we've asked them is to research whether rides actually are originating in Hood River or not. So because they understand that our code does not currently, our code has been passed but not operationalized. So ask them to come back. Hope to have an update for you in the next week or two. And along with some of the other questions that she asked, and I connected with her as she left. So we're working with her. We'll keep her updated. I have one request for action or to think about tonight is at your next meeting, I'll be looking to you to make a recommendation for the McKed seat. So this is Mid-Columbia Economic Development Department. It's a seat that we share with the city of Cascade Locks and then city of Hood River, and we rotate back and forth. Don't need to do it now, but by August 11th, we need to have a name to forward to the county. So
When are the meetings up?
they meet quarterly on a Thursday late afternoon from 4 to 6 p.m. and there's usually a remote option. So
Quarter.
yes.
Thank you.
Yep. So 4 times a year. So think about it. It's our turn, and it would be great to have a volunteer from council.
And anybody who's interested in doing research, Mark Zandmiller was.
I was just going to say
So he would know a lot
he
about
would be a great
what
resource for
it
you.
feels like and stuff.
Perfect. Great. Those are my updates.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Committee reports, Anna? Ben? Didn't mean to rush this, sorry, you passed.
I had a meeting with CAP Vice Chair McRaney last week. Mainly chat about the transportation bill and they're concerned, of course, about that not passing, but hopeful that something will happen in the special session. A few months ago, they reduced some of the Homey Gorge Express service to save money. It's a kind of contingency issue due to funding, so it's not quite as many trips as last summer, but ridership still continues to increase every year there. So yeah, kind of similar to where we're at, I guess, in terms of waiting to see what happens with a special session. So
Great, thanks. A great thing happened with United Way, the Rowena fire. The governor's office approached us to ask if we would play a role in holding the money for a community-wide fundraiser, and we talked about it, and Wasco County was there, and we said yes. And then at our pre-scheduled fundraiser, we had sort of a parallel track of raising money specifically for the Rowena Fire Relief Fund. And we raised like 29,000, and then some more things happened. We raised like 60,000, and then Safeway called and gave us 176,000. So it's like nearly $250,000 in this local community fire relief effort, which of course doesn't hold a candle to the full loss, but it's a pretty good development. And now, of course, there's another fire, so we have to figure out if we're going to have a north side one, and we're calling that governor's office and yada yada.
No committee reports for me.
Amanda.
Nothing for me.
Mayor comments. Pie with the mayor at the library Wednesday night, 5:30. I saw it on social. I chose Marion Barry this time. Council comment. Oh, Grant, I'm sorry, committee, and you get to do double committee and council comments, Grant.
I won't know anything from the Region 1 Act until after tonight. They met the same time as we did. So I'll find that out later. And then for council comments, you heard earlier, but I didn't mention last time, but you heard earlier about the bridge receiving the 125 million commitment from Oregon. So bridge commissioners at some point need to head over to DC to see if we can get the rest of the federal ask secured to go build the thing.
Thank you, Grant. Amanda?
Not really have too much, but obviously, as the gentleman who came in and spoke earlier, the fire issue is in our face and obviously something to be concerned about, so. And I know that there was some stuff going on with that, but you can just remind us where we stand.
Sure.
in Creek area.
Yeah, thank you for that, Counselor, if I may. As you might recall, the county had applied for a grant, and Simone, lost her last name, from the State Fire Marshal's office, was really instrumental in creating that loan application or that grant application. The plan was to get a rare volunteer, a AmeriCorps type of volunteer, to administer fuel reduction for the county. The city actually didn't qualify for the grant, but we were going to subcontract with the county for parts of the fuel reduction that would be inside the city. That all looked like it was ready to go, and then the Trump administration has eliminated AmeriCorps and with that rare volunteers, and so I think the county is regrouping. I'm not clear of the status of the grant itself. It seems like that has also gone. So the county is looking for new opportunities in the city for possible grants for that project. I do know that on the county commission met tonight, same time we did. They are applying for a grant with, I think, with the Bureau of Land Management for some fuel reduction in the wildfire interface areas, the WUIs. It's not clear to me at this time whether city properties or areas in the city would be included in that or not. But everyone is still very much looking for funds and for grants to do this. So I will mention Chief Damien is online with us, and he and I have met with Mr. Labadie a couple times and very involved. I know he's been involved with Firewise communities, which I highly recommend. I think very well of them. However, that was one of the things that Simone was coordinating. So we're waiting for Simone's position to be filled by probably the end of August, sometime in September, to restart those efforts.
Thank you. Any questions about that? Anything, this is sort of the time to talk about issues that came from business from the audience. So would anybody want to talk a little bit more about, I mean, it's not like one of our top 7 priorities, fire safety. I mean, of course, safe and resilient communities in general, but it's just hard to know what to prioritize and deprioritize. And, you know, just wake up every morning and cross our fingers, kind of not the best strategy. But if you have ideas or would like a broader discussion or put on the agenda, I'm happy to hear that.
I will just also add, specific to Indian Creek Trail, there are lots of different property owners and easements. So that is the port, the Parks District, the city, Pacific Power. We're all in conversation just about what does coordination look like for fuel reduction in that.
Doug.
I mean, it sounds like to that topic, things are still in motion as much as they can be. It's not a whole lot coming from the federal government in terms of good indications that there'll be a lot of funding for these sorts of efforts. Certainly there's been talk at the state level about how to fund wildfire prevention with, taking, money from the kicker and all that kind of stuff. It's going to be a huge challenge for us. So I don't know how to solve that, but I'm glad you're continuing to keep working on that effort. For me, nothing.
I realized I sort of jumped over a quorum check. August 11th is our single meeting in August. Raise your hand if you will not be. 1, 2. All right, so we got Grant, Doug, Paul. One of you
said raise your hand if you're not.
Yeah, and you're good.
I'm good.
So we definitely have a quorum, and Gladys, we are not confirming at this moment. So we do have a quorum. Great, thank you. Ben, council comments?
I just want to thank firefighters for their efforts. I have a very good friend of mine who lives right next to Coyote Wall and had to flee basically immediately with pretty much nothing. And thankfully, they still have a house, but some of their neighbors, weren't so lucky and lost their homes. Seems like it's late July and it already seems like I've lived here for 15 years and it already seems like one of the worst, at least in terms of like structural loss, probably the worst wildfire season that I can remember. I mean, Rowena was 56 homes, right there, and I think last thing I saw was 14, I think. Watch Duty has been pinging, which if you don't have that app, it's a really good way to keep up on how things are, what developments are happening with wildfires in the community. So yeah, I just really thank all the crews that are working on it from all over the place right now.
It's like nearly 500 personnel on the fire. Wow.
Yeah, so that's just kind of present in mind right now, and we all feel the same. So thank you.
I echo that sentiment and appreciate what you guys are saying about Steve's consistent or persistent effort of bringing it to our consciousness about this, Indian Creek area and just, making sure that our city is safe. Because I think I appreciate what he said about it's not when, if, but when, it's very likely to happen. I also, you said that we could talk about business from the audience. I appreciate Mike Hendricks' comments about the dark skies. I think that's an important thing to preserve, and I would love to see the summary that he had, if you think that, and also just with the sisters. Hopefully, if that's something that can be incorporated into our module 4, if it isn't already, I'd love to see there's a place for that. So I'm curious. I'll be on the lookout for that. But just that's about all I've got.
That takes us to an executive session. I'm going to read